Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Oh, that did not sound good. That was super scratchy. Hopefully that won't persist. Welcome to the joint study session of the City Council and Planning Commission of the City of Pacifica. It is October 6th, 2025, and we are starting our meeting at 6:04 p.m. I want to acknowledge that we are all here in various seating configurations. So one thing that will be important is if you want to speak, you're going to have to wave me down, wave Samantha down. Could we please have a roll call? City Clerk Coffey.
Councilmember Wright.
Present.
Councilmember Espinoza.
Here.
Councilmember Beer.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bowles.
Here.
And Mayor Beckmeyer.
Present.
With the planning commissioners, Commissioner Redfield.
Present.
Commissioner Godwin.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson.
Here.
Commissioner Devine.
Present.
Commissioner Davis.
Present.
Vice Chair Berman.
Here.
And Chair Hauser.
Here.
Great. All right. I did want to state also that the regular Planning Commission scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. this evening has been canceled. That will be posted, and the agenda will be posted at the time that the documents are ready for prime time. All right. I would like to lead us in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So tonight we have a consideration item, a joint presentation by the Heart of San Mateo and the community development staff to provide us an overview of current state and federal laws that apply to housing development projects, the basics of affordable housing and financing, and a discussion of Pacifica's inclusionary housing ordinance and density bonus ordinance. So we'll receive the presentation and provide direction on updates to staff as well as feedback. And they will ask what they need from us for direction. We have Samantha Updegrave, the Director of Community Development, will present the staff report with Kate Snodgrass and assistance from Assistant City Attorney Karen Murphy. Representatives from Hart are here, Alex Wagner and Tim Davis. Is that correct? And did you have anyone else in your team? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Director Updegrave.
Thank you so much, Mayor Beckmeyer. Good evening, Vice Mayor Bowles, City Council members, Planning Commissioners. I'm Samantha Updegrave, Community Development Director. As the Mayor said, I'm joined here today by Tim Davis and Alice Wagner from the Housing Endowment Regional Trust of San Mateo County, also known as HART, and Assistant Attorney Karen Murphy. Before we dive into our presentation, I want to say, next slide. Congratulations! We have a certified housing element and an approved rezoning program. This is so exciting. In 2019, the city started Plan Pacifica, a comprehensive update that included the general plan, Sharp Park specific plan, local coastal land use plan, and then we ended up adding in the 6th cycle housing element within that. And so these foundational documents really outline the city's vision for its future. And now with this final piece in place, the city is really poised to engage with the details and to shift our focus to proactively translating that vision into implementation and action. So tonight, why are these are different order? Okay. for our agenda tonight, we'll start off with some just basic reminders about state housing law that affect housing development. And the intent here, this is very broad stroke, very much an overview, but the intent is to just help place our inclusionary housing ordinance and our density bonus program into the broader regulatory framework. And I think you'll see as we move through this work together, these kind of brief overviews and refreshers will pop up from CDD staff. Like, I really believe in building that knowledge and common language so that, we can really work through these issues together, as a community, as elected and appointed officials, and city staff. I'm having real slide problems. No, it's me. Then Hart is going to provide an overview of affordable housing. So just what is it? What are some of the basics of how it works? We'll look briefly at some of our housing element goals, policies, and programs, and then we'll really move into the discussion on our inclusionary housing ordinance, our density bonus ordinance, and request feedback for next steps. So just a brief introduction for HART. HART is a 20-plus-year-old joint powers authority created by the San Mateo County jurisdictions to facilitate the creation of affordable housing. In late 2023, HART launched the Housing Consulting Services Program to help local communities improve their housing programs and policies, launch new programs, and meet goals set out in housing elements. Currently, HART is under contract with 8 cities to provide these services, and Pacifica is luckily one of them. Okay. So the state laws that we'll look at briefly are the Housing Accountability Act, Housing Crisis Act of 2019, also known as SB 330, Permit Streamlining Act, State Density Bonus Law, and conclude with trends in state housing laws. The Housing Accountability Act was enacted in 1982 with significant changes to date. This is the law that defines housing development projects as 2 or more dwelling units, or generally mixed use with 2/3 residential. Every year, I think they add to that definition. So there are a lot of different permeations on that, but this is sort of the general world of how it defines housing development projects. The HAA limits the local agency's ability to deny, delay, reduce the density of, or make infeasible projects that comply with objective standards in the general plan and zoning, unless there's a specific adverse impact on public health or safety. And a specific adverse impact is a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified, written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date the application was deemed complete. The Housing Crisis Act of 2019, or SB 330, was enacted in 2020, and even just in these past 5 short years have also had significant changes to date. The goal of SB 330 was to address housing shortage by increasing housing production, preserving existing housing, and streamlining for projects that comply with objective standards in both the general plan and zoning. So how this affects housing development applications, it does provide a preliminary application vesting process, and then the applicant must follow that up with a complete application for the full project within 180 days of the pre-application submittal. It also sets a 5-hearing limit from the date of a complete application. Unless legislative approvals are required, then that 5-limit hearing doesn't apply. It also sets the approval and disapproval timelines based on the environmental pathway. The SB 330 also requires replacement if you demolish residential units, as well as replacement of protected affordable residential units. It prohibits jurisdictions from downzoning unless another site is upzoned so that there's no net loss. and prohibits jurisdictions from enforcing growth control measures. I think when it initially came out, it was set to sunset in 2025, and then it was set to sunset in 2030, and those sunset provisions have been permanently removed with the passage of Assembly Bill 130, so these are now permanent parts of the law. The Permit Streamlining Act was enacted in 1977, significant changes to date. This helps expedite the processing of permits for development projects. It applies broadly, so it's not just housing development projects, but it does have that preliminary application carve-out. Requires jurisdictions to publish submittal requirements, sets timelines and criteria for completeness review, as well as application processing, and has approval or disapproval timelines also based on the level of environmental review. The state density bonus was enacted in 1979, and as you can guess, there have been significant changes to date. It's meant to incentivize construction of affordable units by allowing higher density, and provides the amount of density increase based on the percentage of affordable units and their level of affordability. It provides incentives and concessions based on the percentage of affordability, and then an unlimited amount of waivers. So just to pause, an incentive or concession is broadly a reduction or modification that results in cost reductions that provide for affordable housing costs, whereas a waiver is an exception to a development standard or some standard that would physically preclude the project from being built at its permitted density. So I think all of this is really to show and to say that the trends in state law that we're seeing, including things like SB 9, which you're all familiar with, are really geared towards simplifying the approval and permitting processes, incentivizing affordable housing and also just housing development generally, requiring the use of objective design and development standards, and really increasing the number of ministerial pathways to approval for projects. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Davis with HART. Not you? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Tim Davis. I'm the Director of the Housing Consulting Services Program at HART. I'm glad to be with all of you today. I'm going to begin by going over another part of the law that we need to pay attention to as part of this process is fair housing laws. Recognizing that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did not adequately include housing, the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968, which prohibits discrimination in the provision of housing. This law was further enhanced in 1990 by the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'll read from the quote here. The Fair Housing Act declares that it is the policy of the United States to provide, within constitutional limitations, for fair housing throughout the United States. It does so by prohibiting discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of dwellings and in other real estate-related transactions because of race, color, religion, sex, familial status, national origin, or disability. In addition, the Fair Housing Act requires that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development administer programs and activities relating to housing and urban development in a manner that affirmatively furthers the policies of this act. The California Fair Employment and Housing actually predates that. It's from 1959. And like the density bonus and other laws in California have been updated several times over the years. So the current protected characteristics in California are race, color, ancestry, national origin, citizenship, immigration status, primary language, religion, disability, both mental or physical, sex and gender, sexual orientation, gender expression, gender identity, genetic information, marital status, familial status, particularly families with children under 18 or people who are pregnant, source of income. That usually is referring to that you cannot discriminate against someone who has a Section 8 voucher, for example. history of veteran status, and age. So there is a principle built into the Federal Fair Housing Act of affirmatively furthering fair housing. It is further extended under state law under AB 686 from 2018. The goal of affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH for short, is to combat housing discrimination, eliminate racial bias, undo historic patterns of segregation, and lift barriers that restrict access in order to foster inclusive communities and achieve racial equity, fair housing choice, and opportunity for all in California. In the federal law, it particularly applied to cities that were receiving HUD funding. Now, this city does not get direct HUD funding, but what the state law did was extend AFFH to all cities and jurisdictions in California. And that is built into how you respond in your housing element. And there are fair housing policies and obligations that were spelled out in your housing element that meet this standard, including HEI 5, funding the Housing Action Fund, HEI 6, strengthening inclusionary housing program, and HEI 14, state and federal law conformance. So we'll return to those housing element topics in a bit, but to kind of go over kind of a very broad understanding of what is affordable housing and what we mean in this area, we have affordable housing that can be funded without public funds and those that are funded with public funds and subsidies. We'll start from the left with non-deed restricted housing. This is what we often call NOAA housing, or naturally occurring affordable housing. These are typically older buildings. They're less expensive units in a local market. In order to secure the long-term affordability of these buildings, these may be funded as with public funds and may be used to purchase and deed restrict these units. So those would convert from the non-deed restricted to the deed restricted format. Under deed restricted, you have the privately financed affordable housing. This is where private developers build deed restricted units without any direct subsidies or due to any government requirements. These amounts are quite rare in the Bay Area, but they can exist. Then we have what we're talking about tonight is inclusionary housing and density bonus units. These are required by density bonus laws or inclusionary zoning and are a percentage of the units in a mixed income development. But in these units, no public subsidies are used to create the units. They are cross-subsidized from the market rate to the affordable units. The public funds are subsidized. These are the government subsidized housing. So let me make sure I got the right place here. And these are generally 100% affordable buildings with government funding, including low-income housing tax credits, which there are both federal and state credits, as well as funding from states, counties, and localities. Just to kind of also point out the difference between market rate housing and publicly funded housing, these 100% affordable properties. On the left, we have an example of a market rate development with the total development cost of $22 million. That project could afford, this is a rental project, could afford monthly debt payments of $125,000 a month, which can support a mortgage debt of $19.8 million. And then if you've got 10% equity from the developer and $2.2 million, you can see that the property can kind of stand on its own legs without other public support. Publicly funded housing total development cost, where the monthly debt payments it can support because the rents in the units are significantly smaller, can be maybe only $50,000 a month, which may support a mortgage debt of only $7.9 million, which leaves a significant gap of $14.1 million in funding. A lot of that might be filled by low-income housing tax credits, and then the local or a county grant, or a soft loan, we would say a soft debt of $1 million. The funding sources for 100% affordable housing projects: California Tax Credit Allocation Committee. The federal government allocates tax credits to each state, and then they are given out by the allocation committee here in California, and they have also state low-income housing tax credits. The California Department of Housing and Community Development, they manage federal CDBG and home funds and state bond funds for affordable housing. The County of San Mateo, they also get their own federal CDBG and home funds that they do out through annual rounds of funding, and what are called Measure K funds, which is a property tax, a sales tax that goes into that fund that is used for many social programs, not just affordable housing. Local cities, local funding usually from inclusionary in lieu fees, which we'll talk about in a bit, but also from transfer taxes, transient occupant taxes, or operating funds. Larger communities such as Daly City also have their own federal CDBG or home fund allocation.
Thank you so much, Tim. I actually updated these slides and then didn't send them to Sarah. So I'm going to deviate a little bit from what you see on the screen, and I really appreciate your patience because I think these are important to cover and not skip over. So just as a reminder, our housing element contains goals, policies, and implementation programs. And so the two goals of our housing element are to maintain, improve, and develop housing, encourage the development and retention of housing in a variety of types for all income levels, with priority given to low-income households and projects that foster sustainable urban development. And the second goal is to affirmatively further fair housing, ensure community members have equitable access to safe, sanitary, and affordable housing, foster inclusive neighborhoods, remove barriers to housing for vulnerable communities, and protect residents from displacement. The primary policies that we would look at, kind of related to our topic tonight, are to remove constraints from housing development by streamlining the city's development review and permit process and conducting a significant code modernization initiative, facilitate production of affordable housing with an emphasis on affordable rental housing, workforce housing, affordable home purchase opportunities, and to expand affordable rental and home ownership housing choices in areas of opportunity and higher resources, and promote opportunities for home ownership among communities that are disproportionately underrepresented. Yeah, I'm so sorry that those aren't on the screen. Let me get this back. Oh, wait, they are. Okay.
Sarah's a miracle worker.
It's a miracle. I think I deleted, that's embarrassing. I'm always doing something embarrassing up here, you guys. Thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it.
Let's remember, we don't know the script.
Okay.
None of us up here, none of those people or those people have the script.
All right. Well, here they are on the screen. I know, I shouldn't disclose. So then the programs that those feed into are our zoning modernization and streamlining, strengthening inclusionary housing. So we'll kind of talk about our current effort and then a future effort. State and federal law conformance, particularly around updates to the density bonus ordinance to bring our code into compliance with state law. And with that, I will pass it to Alex Wagner, or back to Tim Davis.
Yeah, I'm going to cover the inclusionary zoning, then I'll pass over to Alex to talk about the density bonus. Inclusionary housing ordinances are built into the zoning code and require a certain percentage of housing units to be income restricted, targeted to a specific income groups. Developers, as I said earlier, do not receive public funds for these units, but are cross-subsidized from other units. That's okay. Almost all the jurisdictions in San Mateo County, except a couple of the smallest, do not have inclusionary housing ordinances. I'll talk very quickly about the nearby jurisdictions for comparability: Brisbane, Colma, Daly City, San Bruno, and South San Francisco. So and they're usually different requirements for rental projects as for homeownership projects. You can see in Pacifica that the current policy is 7.5% of the units at 80% of area median income. Area median income is based on San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo counties. It is published by HUD each year, and then you kind of look at it by both income level and by family size. The total percent of units that are required is 15% of the total units, so the average AMI is 100%. Brisbane is requiring deeper affordability, still 15% of the units, but at an AMI of 50%. Colma has a spread between 60% and 120% for 20% of the units at an average AMI of 88%. Daly City also requires 20% of the units with half at 80 and 10% at 80 and only, I think that's wrong. Total of 10, yes. Average AMI of 80%. San Bruno has a spread from 50% up to 120% for a total of 15% at 83.3 is the average AMI. And South San Francisco, again, they have both at 60% and 80% of area median income for a total percent of 15% at a 73.3% average AMI. For home ownership, you generally set the incomes you're targeting at higher levels. And Pacifica is actually doing the same on rentals and for home ownership at 7.5% at 88% and 7.5% at 120% of AMI for a total of 15%. Brisbane has units at 80% and 120%. Colma is doing spread out between 60% up to 120% at 20% of the units. Daly City is doing 20% of the units at 120% of AMI. San Bruno is 15% of the units with a spread between 80 and 120. And South San Francisco is 15% at a spread of 100% and 120% of AMI. Inclusionary housing here in Pacifica was adopted in 2007, has not been amended. It was created to incentivize affordable units in market rate developments and address the shortage of affordable housing. There was also a resolution passed in 2007 that was not amended, that was intended to be updated but has not been updated, and we'll talk about that further as well. Our role in helping to assist with updating the inclusionary housing ordinance is that our team brings a great deal of experience with inclusionary housing ordinances to the table, and we're working with all the communities in the county around these issues. Not just the 8 cities that we are contracted to, but also through the 21 Elements Housing Managers Group and Planning Group are working to kind of bring everyone in the county to the table to talk about how best practices are and work together to set up common processes and policies. Also, even though Pacifica is not a part of what's being implemented by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the transit-oriented community policy, even though Pacifica is not part of that, we can look to them as a source of best practices as well. So what we're looking at today is really how we can update the policy to meet best practices and as an intermediate step before we get the results of the upcoming 21 Elements Grand Nexus study. So in terms of some of the updates, we're recommending updating definitions to be in line with state requirements and county guidelines. This is really very technical things, not changing the intent or the outcomes of the policy in terms of defining what units are, housing development, defining lower income, moderate income, et cetera. In terms of the applicability and the percentage required, we are, again, trying to do a light touch in terms of changes here. So it applies to developments with 8 or more units, which is unchanged. We would, however, alter the affordability term for rental and for sale units from 45 years to in perpetuity. It seems like a big jump, but for developers who usually have fairly short timelines, 45 years is a long way off, and perpetuity is just a little bit longer than that for them. We would maintain the affordability percentage at 15% of units. For rentals, to kind of bring it in line with the recommendations of the MTC policy, we would recommend lowering the area median income requirement for rental units from 1/2 at 80% of AMI and 80% and 1/2 at 120% of AMI to 1/3 of units at 50% of AMI, 1/3 at 80% of AMI, and 1/3 at 110% of AMI. Now, one of the reasons for this change is also because we are finding out there that these 120% AMI units are not leasing up because there are options out there. People will look and say, oh, it's a new building and it's maybe an affordable rent for me because it's income restricted, but I can live somewhere maybe in an older building at actually maybe cheaper, or they don't have to deal with having their income certified every year, things like that. So we're finding that the 120% AMI rental units are just not moving. For the ownership units, we are, however, recommending no change, leaving half of the units at 80% of AMI and half of the units at 120% of AMI, because even the 120% AMI for sale use are still a fairly significant discount from market rate units, even existing, not just new construction. So in terms of alternatives to doing on-site units, we're looking at making sure that you're looking both at a comparable square footage if you're doing off-site units. So what is you've seen in many policies, and including your policy, is that it says, oh, you have to do 3 units on-site. You can do 3 units off-site. Well, you need to make sure that you're getting a comparable square footage to what you're getting on-site as well. Altering requirements for off-site units, so they must be located with compatible land uses, zoning, and proximate to employment, urban services, et cetera. That's just really a protection for you, that the developer's not saying, I'm going to build 3 units in the middle of nowhere where they can't get to, you know, the bus route, or they can't get into the Safeway or things like that. It allows for off-site preservation, meaning that a developer could purchase or help a nonprofit purchase an existing unrestricted building and restrict it as low income. Land dedication alternatives would also be allowed as long as the value of that land is comparable to what they would cost them to build those units. It would add the ability for the CD director to set requirements for rehab or preservation property and protection of existing tenants in those properties. We're not talking about tenant protections for the community as a whole, but just for those buildings that might be affected by the inclusionary policy. In terms of your affordable housing plan and agreement, we would recommend adding a section requiring an affordable housing plan as part of the application for first approval, so that you have upfront information about what their plans are for their inclusionary or density bonus units and the procedures. Add section requiring an affordable housing agreement that shall run with the land and bind all future owners, and that shall include any standard requirements and any added by the city attorney. In terms of implementation enforcement, we're recommending that the affordable housing agreement must be in place prior to the first building permit issuance, that on-site inclusionary units must be built at the same time as the market rate units. After passage of the inclusionary housing ordinance, new guidelines in the form of an affordable housing manual will be developed for approval by the CDD. This manual will provide additional details on requirements for the affordable housing agreement, resale restrictions, the marketing plan, resident selection process, procedures for setting rents and sale prices, compliance and monitoring procedures, and resale and subordination procedures. Now, we have been working with a group of jurisdictions across the county to do a model guidelines and a model manual, as it were, and we're implementing that town with several cities now. So you would actually, we very quickly after passage of these changes, we would be able to provide a manual that really covers a lot of ground, so that when you've got some small question about, oh, how should we do this, you have a manual to go to. And I think that'll be a very big improvement for you. Monitoring and subordination fees may be added and would be brought to council for approval. In terms of other kind of miscellaneous items, that in terms of primarily point towards state law for simplification of updates. Recommend that for BMR calculations, any fractional amount, meaning a unit under 0.5, shall be paid out as an in lieu fee, and 0.5 and above would be rounded up to the nearest whole unit. That's just a best practice throughout the industry. Amend sections requiring an appraiser instead of using guidelines to determine the purchase price. Update resolution setting in lieu fees based on changes in median home values and the consumer price index. The unit size and design, we recommend amending comparability of size and design requirements to allow for more smaller units or less larger units to restrict it at affordability if approved by the CD director. To explain that a little further is that you have a developer doing a subdivision of single-family homes, and they're each 3,000 square feet, but you know that for affordability purposes, you'd rather have more homes at 2,000 square feet than you would get if you were getting just 3,000 square feet. Or on the flip side, if you were building a multifamily residential building and they're providing mostly studios and you want some family-sized units, we would be able to do that. Interior amenities variance would also be allowed with the approval of the CD director, kind of within some walls, as it were. It's like, oh, you don't have to put the highest, kitchen appliances in, but you want really good ones. That kind of standard. In terms of the overview of the recommended updates, the one thing that we had to work on the last week or so is how to update the in lieu resolution from 2007. For the 2007 resolution, you had a rental unit fee of $205,416 for the lower income household unit you were requiring. For sale unit, it was $561,910. For a condominium townhouse, it was $356,910. So, and then for a moderate income household unit, you were looking for the rental unit only getting $26,732 for the in lieu fee, which really shows that the 120% units are close to market. For sale unit, detached single family, you get a in lieu fee of $465,023, and for the condominium townhouse, $260,023. So for the 2025 update, your original resolution does anticipate how you would do that for the for sale units, which is that it would be based on the change in the median home values. So looking at the San Mateo County Area Association of Realtors, they provide data annually on both single-family house sales and condominium townhouse house sales, which both ran around 40% plus from 2006 to 2024, and these numbers represent that increase on the for sale units. So that you'd be getting $812,000 on a detached single-family house, $500,000 for a condominium townhouse. For a moderate income unit, you would get $672,495 and $364,335 on a condominium townhouse. The resolution did not, however, anticipate how to update the rental fee. There's a couple different methods we could use. The one that is commonly used that we're recommending for this particular update is to use the CPI increase for the San Francisco Bay Area metropolitan area, and it is a 40% increase from 2006 to 2024. So that pushes your rental unit up to $287,494 for a lower income unit, and $37,413 for a moderate income unit. And there is, actually do the next one. That kind of feeds into this final section, this final slide for my section, is that upon updating the inclusionary housing ordinance, the next steps would be completion of the Affordable Housing Manual, which is something we can do fairly quickly. And then the 21 Elements Grand Nexus Study, which is getting underway. There are a number of cities in the county participating in this, what they call a Grand Nexus Study. And it will be probably late 2026 before we really get the results to kind of look at that and to maybe adjust the percent of units required. It will help us to kind of reset and rebalance the in-lieu fees. It will be looking primarily at the feasibility of inclusionary zoning upon project developments. And I will turn it over to Alex Wagoner.
Good evening, City Council and Planning Commission. Thank you for your time and attention tonight. As Samantha and Tim mentioned, my name is Alex Wagoner. I'm a program manager with Heart of San Mateo, working with the City of Pacifica. Tonight, I'm going to be providing our recommendations regarding your density bonus ordinance. As you see on the screen, it was originally adopted in 1986 and was updated in 1992. However, it has not been updated or amended since then. As you can imagine, there are a lot of things that have changed, both in terms of state law and best practices when it comes to density bonus since 1992. The current Pacifica ordinance is actually more restrictive and more discretionary, meaning non-objective, than state law, and so actually cannot be enforced because state law supersedes the city's authority. The current version of state law actually requires fewer affordable units to qualify for density bonus, longer affordability periods, mandates incentives and concessions and waivers, applies to more housing types, and provides more alternatives to construction of those affordable units. Can you pass me that? So for our updates, we recommend looking at consolidating the definition section that you have there. What this will do is that'll actually point to the state density bonus law, and that'll ensure that you're being consistent with those state requirements and best practices, and you don't have to constantly update it every time they change one or two words, which does happen. We also recommend amending your application requirements. As part of that, we want to have a new section that basically outlines a consistent application procedure, which is not currently included. There would also be optional sections to require a standard form for the requests for density bonuses, incentives, parking reductions, and waivers. That way, similarly, we would have a standard form for that, which would ease the burden on city staff and developers. We would also have an optional requirement to have a tentative map or preliminary plan with proposed units and density bonus units. This would be important for analyzing what the developer is requesting and looking at if they're fulfilling those requirements. And by requiring it, you would basically allow for that early enough in the process that we would be able to catch things or work with the developer to fix any problems. Additionally, there would be an optional requirement to include the phasing of the construction of affordable units in relation to the market rate units. That would basically mean that, the developer has to lay out, oh, this is when we'd be building those units, and we can say, oh, you need to do that at the same time as the market rate units. It's not okay to do that at a later time. Next, we recommend also updating some sections on the application review side of things. Currently, there's no actual formal process outlined in the ordinance for how to process density bonus applications. And we also would like to add an optional section to require concurrent submission with the planning application. That's actually something that the City of Pacifica already does in process, but isn't actually outlined in its procedure yet. So we would just codify that so it was an official requirement. And we would also recommend adding a section to the application to demonstrate the housing required by state density bonus law, reasonable documentation for any requested waivers and reductions. As I mentioned before, that would be to sort of evaluate some of those requested waivers and ensure that they're compliant with the density bonus ordinance. As part of the density bonus housing agreement, that is something that is recorded along with the property, and that is what actually ensures that those requirements are binding and enforceable by law. We would want to have a section outlining the requirements of the density bonus housing agreement, so those are standard as well. maintaining affordability in perpetuity for rental and for sale units. As Tim mentioned, developers don't typically care about the duration since they will basically fee out after 10 years. And so for them, the restriction length doesn't matter. This would allow the city to not have to go back at a later date and put more money into the project to restrict the affordability. We would also recommend adding a section to require the affordable housing agreement to be recorded prior to the final parcel map approval. Again, that is to require the developer to record those restrictions so that they are codified and enforceable by law. Next, for those density bonus calculations, this is essentially how a developer's density bonus is calculated based on the number and depth of affordable units that they're providing. The current city law is pretty subjective and doesn't match up with what state law does, so we recommend altering city law to point directly to state law, so that way, again, you don't have to update it whenever it's changed, and ensures that the city's density bonus ordinance is enforceable. We also recommend adding a section to round up fractional units to whole numbers for the number of density bonus units calculated. This is a best practice that we've seen in a lot of other jurisdictions and ensures you maximize the number of affordable units that you're getting in exchange for that increased density. One last section on this category is there is actually an allowance in state density bonus law for commercial developers to use density bonus. Typically what they'll do is they'll do an off-site or an on-site alternative and then partner with an affordable housing developer to create those units, and that allows for them to get similar waivers or density increases. We would have a section that allows for that to comply with state law, and then also a section that requires an affordable housing partner to be a part of this if it was a commercial developer doing that. Lastly, we have a few miscellaneous recommendations, including a section subordinating this chapter to state law. It's already subordinated to state law, but this just makes it clear and official. We would recommend having a comparability section to require the same proportion of bedroom size, distribution of units, and access to amenities for those affordable units. So that means that, you know, folks who are in those affordable units don't get left with lower quality or less access to amenities for their units. We would also recommend adding a section to require a building for a building permit, final inspections and certificates of occupancy be submitted at the same time for the affordable and market rate units. In line with some of our other recommendations, this ensures that the affordable units and the market rate units are completed at the same time. And we would also add a section to require comparable exterior appearance and quality of construction for market rate and affordable units. Lastly, there's a section to add local coastal program consistency to ensure that density bonus law does not conflict with or supersede the California Coastal Act. That's especially relevant in a city like Pacifica, which is subject to that. And this basically means that they must be consistent with the City of Pacifica local coastal program. At this point, we are just to go over the items that we're requesting direction and feedback on. In the short term, we're looking for feedback on some of those recommendations for amendment to the inclusionary housing ordinance, the in lieu fee resolution, and the density bonus ordinance. And then for future updates, we're going to be looking at some of those longer term studies, such as the Grand Nexus study that Tim mentioned, which will provide us some additional analysis and legal backup for the fees that are being determined.
Thank you. And to add on to that, you know, in terms of the future updates, you know, looking at, you know, what are the things that you're interested in having us explore? I know that the housing element, you know, has a whole host of actions and ideas and things to look at, like exploring uses of local density bonuses, you know, changes to ADU requirements, and strengthening inclusionary housing. So this is also a great opportunity for us to hear from you, kind of what your ideas and your goals are, so that we can go back and do some more research and bring those back to you as we look at doing more substantive changes. And that, oh, right. Okay, that concludes our presentation, and we are, just want to open it up. Do you want me to put those questions back, or is that helpful?
All right. It would be helpful to me to see hands if people are interested in asking questions, and we'll just work our way through. Samantha? Greg?
I'd like to go like fourth or fifth.
Okay. Samantha will be first. Number 2, number 3, number 4. We will give you the opportunity to circle back again. It's not your one and only shot. Anyone else? Christine, are you going second?
I don't care.
Because Greg has claimed fourth.
I could go whenever you'd like me to.
Okay. Anyone else? Not at this time, but that remains an option. Samantha, go ahead.
And we're starting with questions, not feedback, right?
Correct.
Okay. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm gonna like qualify that these are kind of the biggest ones that I have. So for the rental, you're proposing removing the moderate and lowering the AMIs. I'm under the impression that there is potentially a new bucket of money for 100% AMI. Is that something that you guys are following, and is that factored in? I heard this from Burbank in Santa Rosa.
I'm not familiar with a new bucket of money for 100% units. I think having it at 100% are a great thing.
Okay.
What we're proposing here is 50,
Can you-
80.
Yeah.
Oh, what we're proposing here is units at 50, 80, and 110, which comes out to an average of 80% of AMI, which is what the MTC TOC policy is kind of proposing for cities. How you kind of maneuver around that 80%, you could be doing 60s, 80s, and 100s if you
Okay.
want. And I think Hart would be supportive of that kind of solution as well.
Okay. I think I saw two different things on the in perpetuity. I saw that it's definitely in perpetuity for rental, but one said 45 years and then for sale. One said 45 years, and then the other seemed to say that the recommendation was also in perpetuity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then on the in lieu fee, have you guys calculated, for what was proposed from the upgrade, have you guys calculated how a developer would look at it? Is the idea that we want the in lieu fee, or is the idea that we want the units, or some combination?
I would say that it's not necessarily about which is preferred, but about providing clear direction in terms of like whichever path the developer is proposing. One thing I wanted to note was that if a project utilizes a density bonus, they're required to construct those units on site. And through the density bonus law, so that's the whole point of the incentive. And, so you might see a development that provides, 10% affordable units, but then wants to fee out for the remainder. And so having
To
really.
get the waivers under
Yeah.
65915, okay.
Right. And so this allows, I think, just one, like more flexibility and more clarity
And
in terms of the fee.
I'll save my thought on this for when we actually do the study session portion, but I think where my brain goes is if the median price in Pacifica for a home is 1.25 and you're selling it at an affordable sales price of $500,000, that's a $750,000 fee to the developer. So if we're only charging them $500K for a unit, we're not going to get on-site affordable housing. We're going to get everyone feeing out, right? So I think the question is what do we want? Or if we don't know what we let's make the math equal. But I'll
Right.
Let's not make the map.
It's,
There's one, we get better property.
Greg, microphone, please, because you're not having a private conversation with Samantha. We all want to hear it.
Sorry
Would you
about
like to
that.
share with the whole class?
Yes, I would.
Oh, thank you.
My preference would be to consider property tax in that equation. The in lieu of fee does not help us in that regard, whereas building on site is more beneficial to the municipality, and that would be my preference.
So we'll discuss that when we're through our questions. Put a pin in that.
Pin in that.
If I can respond to that, please. One, we're kind of in an interesting situation where the Grand Nexus study will really give us more information about what that fee should be.
Yeah.
And give us the opportunity to say, do we want it to be a little bit more or a little
Right.
bit less, depending on what you want to incentivize? And two, so that's why we're kind of just updating it now based on kind of inflation factors. But secondly, your ordinance still would give you all the power to say whether you would allow it to be an in lieu fee. So in other words, it's not an automatic right
Got
of
it,
the
we'd have to
developer.
go to city council.
Yes,
That
yes.
makes more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to clarify when you said, there was a quote where it said, requiring an affordable housing partner. I think that was just associated with the commercial density bonus. Okay, great. And then, my last question, I was reading our code while you were presenting, and I looked at it and I was like, we have very low required, but I see that our current ordinance has a redevelopment area and a non-redevelopment area. What is the redevelopment area? That, maybe I shouldn't ask that question.
I'll need to look into that.
Okay.
And that was a remnant, obviously, from back in the days of redevelopment, and I'm hearing that it's the Rockaway area.
It's
So that
Rockaway,
goes- So
yeah.
that goes away in this new.
That would go away. We would get rid of the redevelopment.
Okay, that's my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Christine?
Oh, could I, if I may, Mayor Beckmeyer, I think it might be helpful to explain what the Grand Nexus study is.
Well, I'd like to, what I noted was end of 2026. That's all I remember about it. But,
Yeah.
and that it includes all cities, not just the 8 that you work with. But
Right.
yes, hearing more would be helpful.
Yeah, so the Grand Nexus study is being undertaken by
Well,
maybe
the-
I'll let.
Yeah, the Community Planning Collaborative, which is a planning organization which created the 21 Elements program, which is for San Mateo County, for the 20 jurisdictions plus the county, is a coordination effort between all the jurisdictions. And not all jurisdictions participate in every effort that they're having. They have Community Plan Collaborative has a similar coalition of organizations in Santa Clara County as well. And what they, the last time that there was an update from many of the cities in the county was also organized by CPC under the 21 Elements banner. And so it is a way to kind of spread the costs, because it can be very expensive to get these studies done. And so under the banner of this one, there's about 15 communities who are all in it together, and they're looking at different parts of it. Some of them are looking for just the inclusionary housing feasibility study, which is what Pacifica is doing, and some of them are also looking for a commercial linkage study, a nexus study. And that's why it's called Grand Nexus. That they're actually, because cities are much more anxious to get the inclusionary housing feasibility study done, that's being front-loaded into the process, and then the commercial linkage will come second, because the commercial is just not happening the same way. And so they've signing the contract now with Strategic Economics to do this study. It is don't make me say the answer specifically, but I think it's around $600,000 study. But each city will be paying maybe about, is it 50,000, I think?
I don't recall.
But it's, yeah, but so it's a significantly less to be doing for each individual community. And as I said, Pacifica is part of it. I think Daly City is, a number of the communities around here are part of it. Yeah.
And so that, because that study is happening, it's going to take some time. And, with the, I'll never get tired of saying this, certification of our housing element and adoption of our rezoning program, we do anticipate getting more applications in, hopefully before the end of 2026. And so the changes that we're looking at right now are, particularly with the in lieu fees, are just like more the minor adjustments accounting for inflation that ought to have occurred, right, annually from 2027. And I think if we were to bring it before you today, these are the numbers we'd probably be proposing. And then, with that deeper dive and that study, then say, okay, like what are the substantive changes? Are there substantive changes that we want to make? Do we want to move to a different kind of fee? Do we want to move to a different, what's our baseline? How do we want to adjust this annually? So I think that we really need that, data and that information that we're going to get from the residential feasibility study that we're a part of in order to like really make those big changes.
Just related.
Yes, please.
What cities again are involved in that collaborative study?
I don't have the list in front of me.
The Grand Nexus?
correct.
Yeah,
I can probably take a few minutes in my emails and
Later's
dish it out.
fine, but
Okay.
I think it's relevant. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Christine.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions. On the inclusionary ordinance, you mentioned ownership was a half at 80% and a half at 120, and that was your recommendation to keep that, I believe. I'm just curious why not lower, and if, just based on our nation's history of redlining, right, that has put disadvantaged communities even further behind, are there any exceptions to that we could make to help those catch up, even if they're below those numbers?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do here is make as few changes as necessary. What you have currently is in line with the Metropolitan Transit Commission's TOC policy. So we're just kind of aligning it with that, which a lot of other cities are doing. But I think I'd be happy to have a conversation with you more about whether you want to make those units at a lower income. In my work, I've traditionally worked in a city where we did 80% and 100% of units, AMI units, and found that to be very effective in meeting the needs.
And my understanding too is that once for ownership units, when you start dropping below 80%, it gets more difficult to find income qualified buyers. Like that's a struggle matching
Once
that.
we're getting down to 50% of AMI, they're spending all their money just on the maintenance of the unit or the HOE fees, and they actually don't have much money for the mortgage at all. Well, the California law does not actually have a provision where the HOA fees are based on the income of the owner. So, you're looking at a place that has HOA fees for $1.3 million townhouses, and that 50% owner is going to pay the same HOA fee. California does not permit you to reset the HOA fees by income. Some other states do allow that on the BMR units to actually have lower fees than the other units.
Okay, so that sounds like something to talk to Wiener about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just,
Oh, yeah,
I
please.
just want to check on that one because I also had that question, so thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. And then you mentioned, I think, in lieu fees need, and all the affordability aspects of a project need to be presented and approved early in a project's application review. I think I heard you say with a town map approval. So what happens if the developer changes their mind? So we've had, two of those. One recently that thought they wanted to change their mind after going through the approvals and then changed their mind back. And then another that from what I understand and having pieced together the history, the change never came back to the Planning Commission or the City Council. It was approved by staff. So I just want to make sure what is allowed and that we have good, controls for that if a developer wants to change after they've gone through the public process and gotten their approvals.
Before we answer that, I did want to, to make an announcement about the Planning Commission hearing, just in case anyone has come in the interim. Do you want me to say it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone is here for the 570 Crespi project for the Planning Commission hearing, that meeting has been canceled. I'm sorry if you didn't get the cancellation. I don't see anyone moving, so I think we're good.
Most people were here
Yeah.
when I made the announcement, but thank you for thinking of that. And two, for anyone who's online wondering, when's that Planning Commission meeting going to start?
To return to a previous question, I have the list of cities that are
Okay.
participating in the Grand Nexus study. Belmont, Brisbane, Daly City, East Palo Alto, Half Moon Bay, Menlo Park, Pacifica, Redwood City, San Bruno, the City of San Mateo, and the County of San Mateo. They're all participating in the study.
Did you say San Bruno? After
Correct.
Redwood City, San Bruno, San Mateo, and San Mateo County.
Correct.
I got EPA before Half Moon Bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's 1, 2,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I think it's,
Okay.
that's 12
Oh,
jurisdictions.
12.
12 jurisdictions.
Vice Mayor Bowles, I want to make sure that I understood your question. So one part of it was about if a developer changes their mind, so they go through their entitlements, as if they're doing on-site, and then they want to switch at some point to the in-lieu fee. So we did have that come up recently, and staff and Hart, on behalf of staff, worked with the developer on trying to come up with a fee that would have then been brought to the city council. So in the current iteration of the ordinance and in the future ordinance, in-lieu fees would absolutely come before the council. And then along with that, you were asking about the requirements at the map. Could you repeat that part for me? I want to make sure I have it right.
What I said was, what I think I understood was that all of these agreements would come fairly early in the planning process. So the developer knows what they're buying into too, right? So if they have, several meetings, that would be one of the early things discussed and agreed upon, right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So there's no path for in-lieu fees to be taken in an underhanded way by staff or anything. That's
No,
that would be in the.
Completely transparent process
okay.
with the involvement, with the
Okay.
inclusion of the council.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, and if they were to go through all of their entitlements and then change their mind, they have to come back, I believe, through Planning Commission potentially, and also through council. So there's not really an incentive to change your mind at the last minute. I don't think you gain from that. It would add time and process.
Right. Okay, thank you. And then I've had a number of questions from the public, and I'm still a little not clear myself. Can you just broadly, for projects that involve residential, when are density bonus laws applicable? When can a developer invoke? Is it a certain number of affordable units? What is the trick?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. Basically, the developer would have to opt in to do it using density bonus, and they do that by providing those units at affordability as outlined. There's a state density bonus chart. I think it's actually on one of the earlier slides, where it's like, okay, let's say you provide 10% of your units as affordable at 80% of area median income, that qualifies you for like a 15% density bonus, or for a number of waivers. And that's all dependent on the number of units that you provide, or the percentage of units that you provide at affordability, and the level of affordability that you provide. Yeah, sorry, the chart's it's a big chart.
I'm hoping the slides will be shared afterwards, because it'd be great.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah. So even like a small project that only has one affordable unit could potentially use a density bonus if they met the AMI requirements.
So I think in order to qualify, it does have to be a housing development project, so it would need to be 2 or more units. Yeah, and then we'd have to look at the table to see what kind of bonus, but a smaller project could use a density bonus.
Okay.
I haven't seen that. Does not mean it's not coming, or that it won't happen. But I think for, the requirement to build on-site units can be really cost prohibitive. And so I think you do tend to see it in more like mid to large projects. But does not mean it can't happen. Yeah.
And then just,
You follow on?
Just to add to, I think, what you were asking, so what triggers state density bonus law is 5 units.
Okay,
It can be
yes.
5
Thank you.
very low, 5% very low, 10% low for rental, or 10% moderate for sale. And then there's a whole bunch of different, like, senior housing, student housing that trigger different things. And they trigger the amounts of density bonus in here, but the unlimited waivers and incentive is triggered by any one of those percentages.
okay, great.
I think the city attorney was going to say.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
please.
please.
I saw you
I
grab
think
your
everyone has addressed what I was going to say, but thank you, thank you very much. And just in general, it's a low percentage that triggers the density bonus.
And then for right now, for projects that are in the queue right now, or someone who might submit one tomorrow, since our density bonus law is we can't enforce. So we're following state standards in what we are allowing and reviewing.
That's correct.
That's correct.
All right, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Lauren?
Thank you, and thank you for the comprehensive presentation, both staff and consultant teams, so thank you. I guess I've been writing more questions as we've been talking, so jumping off of the density bonus minimum requirement, understanding the state requirement, is it in the city's purview to have a new minimum number of units for that requirement? Like instead of 5 very low income, if we wanted to, could we make that 8 very low as our minimum? So going above and beyond the state requirement.
The city can add an additional local density bonus, and some jurisdictions do that. If you go above and beyond the state density bonus, then there's certain incentives or increased density bonuses that the city can grant. So that is something that the city can consider. But you can't go have a lesser requirement than state law, obviously.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Jumping back to in lieu fee, for our city in lieu fee payment, what is the smallest level of development where that applies? Is it if you're building any new unit, even if it's just 1 unit?
It's 8 units.
8 units.
Is when it kicks in.
Okay, 8 units when it kicks in. So a single-family home that's going to build 2 new ADUs, this is not, okay.
That's correct.
And then lastly, the slide that discussed the tentative map requirements that are being recommended, the word optional was there?
Yeah, so sorry, thank you. Just to speak to that, all of them are optional. I guess, well, technically no, if you want your density bonus ordinance to be enforceable. But the ones that are
Well,
Okay, well, I guess.
the ones that are sorry, the ones that are labeled are optional. Those are going above and beyond what's in state density bonus law, so you wouldn't have to include those ones, but they are best practices.
And I also think, to clarify, they're options presented to you for consideration, but those would be things that would be incorporated into the ordinance and would then be required. So it's more like, here are some options of things that we can do, of changes that we can make, things that we can include, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a choose your own adventure for a developer reading our code. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's kind of
Yay.
where my question was, because everything here is an option for us to look into. So that word optional in those slides is, sorry, can you state it? It's above
Yeah.
and beyond?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are based on what are considered best practices that some jurisdictions have put into place because of issues that they've encountered or things that they found are helpful, but they're not required under state law.
Okay. And, sorry, maybe I didn't catch it, because we already have a tentative map process that's required. So what is the aspect that's going above and beyond again?
So this is for the density bonus ordinance specifically. So I think that I'm not, familiar with the specific tentative map process, but this would be for density bonus projects that they would be required to submit a tentative map at the time of their density bonus application. I can go back to the
I guess.
specific slide.
It's, I believe, slide 35.
I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but any housing
So-
development that is I'd imagine they go through our typical tentative map process.
Yeah, it's very typical for developments typically come in with all of their required entitlements. So I think in practice, we do see that. If someone's coming in with a housing development, they're coming in with their use permit, their site development permit, their tentative map, their tree removal, any of the other
Right.
things, right? We process those as a consolidated application. I think that looking at, one of the things that we don't just do well in our code, I think generally, is outline, application requirements or how we process things. And so part of looking at both the inclusionary and the density bonus is to just help, outline some of those parameters, that staff can use, that applicants can use. So I don't know that this would make any change to our current process.
Is it more, we want to make this requirement explicit?
Yes, yeah, so it's
Got it.
partially that, and then, looking at the actual section now, it's also so that they designate which units are going to be the density bonus affordable units. And so we have a map of what the building is going to look like and which of those units are going to be deed restricted as affordable.
And that's not currently explicitly required in our
Correct.
code.
And so
Okay.
that's, to look at those comparability requirements, like, let's say a developer is doing 3 affordable units, they can't just put them all on the first floor, for example. So we see, these are, the specific unit numbers that are going to be.
Or they can't just
deed
have a
restricted.
note on the tentative map saying that 8 of these units will be affordable,
Exactly.
but not as, got it.
And it's,
Okay.
or looking at we can then look at the square footage and say, they're giving us all of their affordable units are the smallest ones.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, great. All right, Greg, you're up. Number 4.
In the very, very beginning, you were talking about timelines for permits. Can you give me some rough expectations of what a developer might expect for a length of time, since a lot of the expense in doing a development is tied up in carrying costs?
Thank you, Councilmember Wright. It's a challenging question to answer because so much of it we have no control over how long an application spends in an applicant's court. We have some projects that have been inactive for years.
Then could you limit your response just to the time that your department?
That our department, yes. So the Permit Streamlining Act requires us to review and provide written comments within 30 days of the submittal. And so when they submit their initial application, when we're processing it for review, and then there are various timelines, especially with the new state laws that have passed, that then require action within a certain number of days based on the CEQA.
But altogether, big picture, 2 years, 3 years?
It could, depending on the size and the complexity of the project, I would say potentially like 1 to 3 years. And the more we can clarify and simplify, the hope is that some of that time also comes down. It's I think one of the overall goals just in modernizing in general.
So the longest time frame I heard you say was 3 years?
As a potential.
Oh, okay. And looking at it backwards, if our goal is to build more affordable units, what of these different menu options that we're being presented with in the past has yielded more affordable units? Could you do a little bit of a discussion on that?
Can you hear him in the audience? Yes? Okay, thank you.
And I can repeat the question. It was of the sort of the menu of options, things that are being presented, what has the potential to yield the most affordable units?
Not the potential, but in the past.
In the past.
What has yielded more affordable units, going by the theory of past performance is indicative of future results?
Right.
And you probably need to look at other cities and not Pacifica.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
Yeah,
let's see.
I was gonna say,
Go back to 1977 and you know what I mean.
so you can't, it's very much about the feasibility numbers. And you can ask for more units at 120% of AMI than you can at 80% of AMI because the cross subsidy between units is smaller, but then you're getting units that aren't as useful for your community. So it's really a policy question that way. But I think the important thing in terms of are you getting the value for the community is whether or not you're setting your policy so that the developers are still building and still giving you units. And that's what the feasibility study is going to do for us, is to kind of tell us where are we today in terms of construction costs and the cap rates, as they say, and interest rates and other things that developers are looking at, and what can you do to provide so that projects are both feasible and still provide affordability. But it has been my experience that cities that are around 15%, which was an MTC policy is kind of saying, are usually in a pretty safe area in terms of being able to get units produced. Cities that are doing like 20, 25%, those are the ones that are like, some of them are re-examining their policies and saying maybe we should pull them back.
Yeah, because 15% of something's a lot better than 100% of nothing.
Correct.
That's true.
So what gets more affordable housing built if we let people pay into a fund or if we make them build it on site?
I've looked at this question a lot over the years. I used to work in a large city where we had a very active pipeline of 100% affordable housing projects, and our housing director would just as soon take the money because they felt like they could really get these projects moving. But we also had a political situation where community groups, fair housing groups, wanted to see the units in the buildings to make sure that they were spread across the city, that they were being built in the same neighborhoods that were growing. And so but that is a situation where you have a strong, like, network of organizations that are building these properties. In smaller cities, if you get $1 million into your affordable housing fund, it may be a very long time before you're able to turn around and give that to a 100% affordable housing project. There may be not many sites for it. There may not be organizations that are on the ground able to spend it. And so in smaller communities, I advocate for doing them mostly on-site, because then they're getting built at the same time that the projects are getting built.
And I think just to add something is that oftentimes, developers are not a monolith. What they're going to want is going to depend on their financial circumstances. And so that's part of what we want to amend with these policies is allowing for some of those alternatives, right? Like for one developer, it might work best for them to do land dedication because they have a site that they've already acquired previously that for whatever reason they can't develop. Or for a different developer, it might make more sense for them to build those units on site or pay out an in lieu fee. And what they're going to care the most about is, I think, having those clearly outlined policies and procedures that are in line with some of those state laws, because that is what gives them certainty, which is what allows them to run their financial numbers and feel good about the money they're spending.
And which way do cities benefit from the repeated property tax revenue more? With people paying into the in lieu of fee and then having nonprofit developers come in and build, or having them built on site?
If I interpret your question correctly, you're asking about the impact on property taxes?
Yes.
Yeah, so units that are on site, they're still paying property taxes. 100% affordable buildings built by nonprofits can get the welfare exemption and therefore not be paying property taxes. So that, in that respect, the city is getting more benefit by the on-site units.
And I have a few more, but somebody else should have a chance to ask questions.
I have a question. I would like to go back to your recommendation that we align with the MTC TOC guidelines.
Yep.
Can we go back to that slide for a second, please? I don't even know which one it would be. But I just want to go through so that I have a better understanding of what that is.
Yep. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has a transit-oriented communities policy.
Okay.
But they are implementing in cities around the Bay that have immediate access to high-impact transit sources. So Pacifica doesn't. It's not on BART. It's not on Caltrain. It doesn't have, actually, ferry services can count to that as well. And so the TOC policy is anticipated that it is cities have to get certain amount of points to be eligible for certain transit funds or to get preference for certain transit funds. And the point system is based on a number of policy areas. It's based on parking requirements near the transit node. It's based on density around the transit location. But it's also, you get points for meeting housing policy goals. And they are based on production, preservation, and protection. So those three policy areas. There's also some for commercial as well. And for each of those areas, they're saying they have a menu of options where you get points based on meeting at least two of those options. So the inclusionary housing ordinance is amongst one of the options for production. And so they have given guidelines for if you meet or exceed these requirements in your inclusionary housing ordinance, you get the points. And so San Bruno, for example, their rental numbers, their rental affordabilities are a little bit higher, meaning not as deep affordability as required. And so we're working with them to make a minor adjustment to theirs to bring them to that deeper affordability required by the policy. In preservation, it could be funding towards preserving existing housing and making income restricted. That's a preservation policy. Protection policies are very much about tenant rights policies mostly. It's about and tenant anti-harassment ordinance. It's about no net loss. When there's a development of building, there's a number of different ordinances cities can adopt to meet those requirements. And because we're working with other cities that are transit-oriented communities, we're also very familiar with what those policies are. And as we're working with you, both the Planning Commission and the council, on what you may want to do to strengthen your protection, preservation, and production policies, regardless of being a TOC community or not, we can help advise on that.
And so those evaluations and looking at those options would be something you would be bringing forward to the Planning Commission and to the council after the Grand Nexus study is completed, or during the interim phase between now and when it's completed?
Well, again, because you're not a TOC policy committee, you're not on a timeline.
Okay.
So we're really at your direction.
I
on
see.
that. So it's like
Okay.
if you're saying, we're interested in looking those policies, we can then come and say, okay, these are the best practices that other communities are doing. If you want to align with them, there are model ordinances that are being produced by the Association of Bay Area Governments to kind of, so that multiple cities are adopting basically similar ordinances. And so you're a tenant in San Bruno, you might have the same tenant ordinances as in Millbrae. So it doesn't matter what side of the line you're on, you kind of may have some of the same rights.
What I'm sensitive to, as you can imagine, is, as soon as you say MTC and you say transit-oriented communities, I go, none, right? And then I start to worry that there's expectations that will impact parking and things like that, that are something we need to have a little bit of a different spin on in Pacifica, because we don't have that high quality or high frequency transit, and we don't have the connectivity to, and so when you mention Millbrae and San Bruno, I go, yeah, but they have a Caltrain station. Yeah, but they have, a super station that has BART and Caltrain, and right away I go, we don't have those things. So I'm just putting this on the map for us because it's something I've been focusing on a lot lately and want to make sure we find our way to get those points. So thank you for that.
Yeah, they're not looking to you to get the points. They're not requiring you to meet this policy in any way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just to add on, part of the reason we look at MTC as kind of the baseline for some of what we're looking at here is their expectations aren't entirely based on fulfilling that. They're also just looking at regionally what our best practice is. So especially for some of the items that are less related to that transit item, they're looking at, okay, what has worked well for jurisdictions across the Bay Area? And that's also part of why we included some of the recommendations from the 21 Elements BMR working group as well, because that's less of a transit-oriented group. And so that was looking with jurisdictions from across San Mateo County at, okay, what are some of the standards and what are we hearing from developers across the county as something that works.
Okay, great. I did have one other follow-up. On the Grand Nexus study, you mentioned it was $600,000 cost, and each city would pay approximately $50,000, is what I think I heard.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
I think, though, based on what we're participating in, so, a jurisdiction that's, pursuing commercial linkage fee study and the residential feasibility, like their fee would be higher.
Okay, that's where I was going.
Yeah, so there's some proportionality
Appreciate that.
within that.
Yeah, because, one thing that could be true is we aren't pursuing as many things, but it's also possible that we're further behind. As you mentioned in your, some of the early slides, the last time some of our things were updated was like in 97 or, something. So it may be a city that has more recently updated their ordinances, doesn't need quite as much tinkering, and Pacifica may need to, reach a little further. So I just really again, wanted to make sure that that fee structure is in keeping with what we need to do in Pacifica. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Ferguson.
Mind if I have a few questions?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Just educationally for me, could you speak to, in 2025 for the below market rate housing, what the 80% and 20% AMI levels are? And I mean, both an income level and what the subsidy is for that income level?
Can you use your computer?
Yeah, so just real quick, there's, it's based on household size, and there's not it's not really a subsidy necessarily, it's more like a restriction on the amount of rent that's allowed to be charged. And
So for 80%, what would be the ceiling or the
I'm
peak?
going to look it up.
I assume that answer is per number of bedrooms or something like.
it's, yeah.
Yes, it is, it is.
It's $156,000 for a
Is the
four-bedroom.
income
Or
level.
for a 4%.
Yeah. So when they're looking at eligibility for a house, when they're looking at eligibility for a household, they're looking at the household size and what the maximum income can be. And for an 80%, so for a family of 3, the maximum income for an 80% unit would be $139,250. The maximum sales price or the maximum rent would be based on the units, the number of bedrooms, and then we do some formulas to say, okay, it's a 2-bedroom unit, we would expect a family of maybe 3 to live in it, and then we set the rents or the sales price based on what would be affordable to that.
Who
household.
sets those?
It is actually, the county has guidance in terms of setting the rents, and they have rents on here, but it would also be, that would be part of your inclusionary housing ordinance to clarify that, to clarify what that process would be. That's one of the things that was also challenged with your current ordinance, is how to set the sales prices. It's a little fuzzy in there, and
You'd
so.
set a start date at a start level for all of these number of bedrooms, whether it's sale or rent in 2025, and they would be attached to consumer price index and just scale naturally? Or do they get reviewed by committee at some point?
It would be, the thing is, what we would do is we can do a couple of other options, but the one that works best is that it is clearly defined in how you determine it in the ordinance, and then it is set for each property at the time that they're actually going to market and approved by the CD director. The sales price is the most complicated because it uses a lot of different inputs, including like what's the current interest rate, what's the actual HOA dues. So it'll vary. It's not going to be the same price for a year for all units created.
Sure, but given a 2 to 3 year window for development, I can see a real advantage to understanding what those numbers are up front to a developer, right? If you don't have clarity on what you have to rent it or sell it for, it's hard to make the math work when 20% of your units are.
Right. I understand. For rents, it's going to be, the formula is fairly simple. The county does publish numbers. What you're at risk at is, I'm going to come in 2025 to get my entitlements for a project, and I don't actually open the doors until 2027. What you're looking at, your risk is what's the change in the area median income? Because the area median income is how they set the rents. It's not based on a number of other features like interest rates and things like that. But for home ownership projects, we can run the numbers for you today to say, if you were selling units today, this is what you would get. But you're still at risk for some changes, just as if you were selling other units because of interest rate environment, for example.
So if you have a tenant who's, for example, a teacher who qualifies for an 80% area median income, and then some AI boom happens and the area median income jumps way up but doesn't track with public servant salaries, which happens in the Bay Area all the time, do those people then have their rent readjusted to the new area median income level, or is it locked in for some period of time?
So this is where we have to have provisions in the legal agreements that there's not an increase over a certain percent given this AMI increase. So I've seen this. I've seen it where it increased 16% in 1 year.
AMI.
The AMI increased 16% in 1 year, and we're not going to pass that along to the tenants. So then you have a cap on what they can do within the rental restriction agreement, usually like a 5%, to make that
And
clear.
the goal is to include all of that language at some point in
Yeah.
the local ordinance.
Yeah.
Got it. I had a follow-up question. We talked about HOAs not being subsidized, and I could kind of understand why. But if you have a purchased below market rate unit, is the state property tax subsidized for those parcels?
So how that works is that their property tax is set based on what they paid, just
Based on
as
their
it is
below
for a
market
market rate unit.
rate.
So in
Same
effect,
percentage, but at a lower purchase price.
lower purchase price. So they do pay a lower property tax than the next door unit that sold for 1.3 million.
Depending on when they bought it.
Yeah, exactly. So they do benefit from a lower property tax, not property tax rate, but a lower property tax, but they don't benefit from any kind of lower HOA fee.
Yeah, I only ask because a market rate unit property tax is like $15,000 a year in Pacifica,
Yep.
right? Somewhere in that ballpark. That's an enormous hurdle for someone with.
Yeah.
And that's typically factored in when we do those calculations is, oh, you're not placing someone into excess, burden based on their housing costs. It's typically about 30% of their income, and that factors into how you do the calculation.
Total housing cost.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you want to?
Just to clarify, I think so on rental, you wouldn't have HOA dues,
No.
right? You'd have them on for sale.
That's just ownership, yeah.
And when you're calculating a sales price, you're netting out, you're taking the percent of income that like 30 or 35, depending on income level, right? But then you're netting out your monthly costs, and you would include your HOA dues in it. So even though I would agree that it's not subsidized, it is being considered. If you're living in a $500 a month HOA or a $200 a month HOA, your affordable sales price is adjusting based on that input, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So it does affect that, but it's still when someone's paying all their money towards their HOA fees, there's not much money left for the mortgage.
Yeah, because that's kind of where it factors in is basically on the really low end. Like if you're looking at like a 30 or a 50% AMI restriction, it's like, oh, okay, maybe you're only paying, $1,100 or less for it, but it's still $400 of that is your HOA fee, and that's still $400 out of your pocket at the end of the day.
And that's not affected, like, let's say you're in a very low category and you're being qualified at 50% AMI, but your affordable sales price is being based on 40% AMI, right? And you're netting out the HOA dues, so your sales price is going to be lower. Like, your payment should adjust down, right?
It does.
Okay.
Yep.
But what do you do in the case of a cash call on HOA fees? Like, let's suppose you need to replace all the roofs, then what happens?
They pay the share that they would have paid if they were a full market buyer in the building. This is also a cause of concern because you have
It's a big risk for them.
You have a very big risk for, a very low-income household not having the cash on hand that an upper-middle-class household might have.
And is there funding available from the county to help people like that?
No.
From the state, from anybody?
No, but it's my recommendation that there should be such a fund available out there. I have seen in cities that have had longer histories with BMR units that they've had to occasionally step in and help out with a condo association or a specific condo owner to kind of keep them afloat. Maybe using some of their kind of home repair funds to let it apply to their part of the common area costs. Yeah.
Good question, thank you. Commissioner Ferguson, did you have other questions?
I had some general questions, but I'm going to leave them.
Who else?
Just a
Councilmember.
question about,
In the mic.
community benefit. So if we're doing a big project that has high density, can we request having open space and also maybe a childcare or something, or a park, depending on the density?
So actually, part of density bonus does include having a childcare facility as part of it. You can't force a developer to do anything. You can definitely request it in the negotiations. But there is an incentive in density bonus to have a childcare facility. There's not anything for like an open space. But I think part of the strength of inclusionary and below market rate units in those developments is that these are, market rate developments that will have those market rate amenities like open space or a gym or those sorts of things. And that's why we have the requirements that they have access to all those same things.
Thank you.
You mentioned you might have other things. Greg, would you like to go forward?
Defer to Sam.
Most of mine are opinions at this point.
Okay,
Okay,
Greg,
then
go
I
ahead.
have questions. Let's see, where do I want to start is the question. What are some of the, in terms of the rentals, what are some of the potential unintended consequences that you can foresee, such as garbage rates getting higher than CPI, for example, or sewer rates getting higher faster than CPI?
You mean in terms of the cost to the landlord of the
And
project?
is there any kind of built-in adjustment anywhere along the way, or is it just set and that's it?
AMI has tended to increase, at least in this region, faster than some of those other costs. So that usually does it. And of course, if they have a vacancy, they can rent it at their maximum rent. So it's kind of like
The maximum AMI?
the maximum AMI rent. So if someone moves out, they can kind of move it back up to that full rent.
So in a hyperinflationary environment, though, it is potential with a 5% cap that it could outpace over time.
Right, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. That's that question.
And there is the potential also to renegotiate with those legal agreements.
Yeah, I think we can look at doing legal agreements that have some kind of provision for if there's coming back to the city to say, hey, this isn't working and we need to increase the rents more. It's not the same as regular rent control. It's all kind of within these legal agreements.
Yeah, especially in a high tariff environment, things
Yeah.
like roofs could potentially be more expensive. Who knows? In this day and age, and I get a little bit concerned about that. When we're doing things like, back to the buying the affordable things, when we're passing things like parcel taxes or sewer rate increases, should we consider affordable units and a different rate for them in those considerations?
So, as part of the calculation for that, there's something called a utility allowance that's factored in. And basically the way it works is what any utilities that the tenant or owner would pay for are factored into that to allow for them to still pay for their utilities without, going into housing cost burden.
Yeah, and those are regulations too that are outside of.
Yeah.
Are really outside of what we might have what we would have in an ordinance.
But a parcel tax isn't.
But in terms of things like sewer rates and things like that, so it's an issue that it's adjacent, but it's really outside of what I think we're able to regulate in our code.
Yeah, I'm just looking at trying to keep an affordable unit affordable and not get people into an affordable unit and then have them have no place to go.
And if you're talking about rental units, I just kind of want to reiterate or restate what Alex said, is that the utility allowance is that if the sewer cost goes up on the landlord or it goes up on the tenant, then they just pay less rent, meaning there's.
What if they're an owner, though?
If they're an owner, this is where there is a risk. There is that risk.
And then there was a chart earlier about all the different rates that all the surrounding cities do. Could you speak a little bit to what some of the advantages and disadvantages are of some of those different strategies and what seems to get more housing built compared to what doesn't?
Sarah, would you mind putting that chart back up? It was kind of near the top of the deck.
Oh, yeah.
That
There
one.
it is.
Whoops. Right there. Thank you. Is that, oh.
Did you want
the
rental or home ownership?
rental or ownership, Greg?
Or does it?
Both, actually.
Both, okay.
Well,
okay.
let's start with home ownership.
I'd like to say I have an answer. But no one has done a study recently to say, oh, Daly City had this rate and this number of units were generated. We don't have a good kind of census on what has been created in each city. I think that, I'm not sure if that will be, I don't think that will be part of the Grand Nexus study, but that is something that would be worthwhile looking at. Yeah.
And believe it or not, that's all the questions I have.
I do believe it. Oh, Commissioner Ferguson.
I have a follow-up question. It's not about this provision, but I was thinking about 120% area median income below market rate housing, and I have to imagine doing the math that most of the residents of Pacifica qualify for 120% area median income.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the one person, 100% for the county is $130,000 annually. So that's always the stat I give that I think sticks the most easily in people's minds.
Sorry, the 1% is what?
It's 100% of AMI for a one-person household in San Mateo County is $130,000, or
Right, so if you have a family of
130,600.
4 or 5 and 120% of area income, I don't know what that is, but it's.
It's like 200, it's like 215,000 or something like that, yeah. For a
Got it.
family of 4.
Does the city do anything to advertise to those people that these programs exist or could exist? It's going to be half of our BMR program, and all of the city qualifies for these, not all probably, but, I would guess that 2/3 of Pacifica qualifies for this. Is there anything we do to, is outreach of like, hey, all these new developments are going in, but by the way, 8% of this is going to be for anybody here?
I'm going to rephrase that question. For cities that have built a lot of things recently with these kinds of features, what are the practices around informing the community and the public of these options?
Yeah, I mean, cities they'll put it on their website, they'll put in information if they have regular newsletters, other outlets. A traditional form is also using newspapers, which of course is in great decline. One thing that is now available to us that wasn't until recently is called Doorway. Doorway is a new project of Baja, which is kind of part of ABAG, that provides a one-stop place for people looking for affordable housing anywhere in the region, except
Sorry,
San
can I just
Francisco's.
interrupt? Baja is the Bay Area Affordable Housing, and ABAG is the Association of Bay Area Governments.
Right. It is a one-stop online shop that is in multiple languages for individuals looking for housing anywhere in the Bay Area. All the counties except for San Francisco is still doing their kind of own system under what's called Dahlia. And it provides a place where you can basically look and just push a button and say, I'm interested, I think I'm qualified for this particular project and for that particular lottery. Then there's a lottery held. I know that there's, I think it's in Burlingame that just came out, and they had over 2,000 applications for several units there. But it's also incumbent upon both the developer and the cities to say, we need to reach out to your community specifically, whether it's through newsletters, organizations, things like that. It's important for that to happen.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that if you have a Baja, people are looking around for all these projects, it would make sense to me to give some sort of at least early notice or advantage to the people that already live here that already should qualify for these versus someone who's been shopping affordable housing and knows, and most people don't do that when they're doing housing, especially if you're at 120% AMI?
Yeah, and that will be part of too, with the BMR manual, helping us, really outline like what are the preference points with for sale units.
Yeah, so you already have a local preference within your ordinance. It is useful, however, it is standard practice that a local preference is backed up by what we call a disparate impact analysis that makes clear that although you're doing a local preference, you're not hurting the ability of people of certain races or backgrounds from being able to access those units. So in a disparate impact analysis, you're looking at the local demographics compared to the county demographics and saying, okay, they're probably fairly similar, so it's okay to do a local preference. Or you can do a local preference, but only to on a certain percent of the units. And so this is something that I'm actually leading right now, is getting a multi-jurisdictional disparate impact analysis done that would include Pacifica, so that you have this kind of legal grounding from a fair housing perspective to go ahead and continue to implement the policy you already have.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't suggesting giving an advantage for applicants, just that they at least gave them an equal footing for applying in the first place.
Yeah.
I was going to mention one thing that we've required for some developments and that we would want here is having an affordable housing marketing plan. And basically what that does is it requires the developer to take a look at your local community, look at who, potentially disadvantaged groups are or folks that wouldn't normally hear about something like this, and then go out to community organizations that work with those folks or publications that are seen by people.
Sure, I just think that if you're talking about 20% above median income, you're not talking about people that think of themselves or want to be thought of as disadvantaged people, right? Pacifica is historically a very blue-collar town. Our area median income is skewed in a different direction. These people aren't going to think of someone as like, oh, I should qualify for affordable housing. If I could have one more quick question. I don't know where the direction came from for 7.5% at 80 and 7.5% at 120, but why skip over the 100% AMI level?
Isn't that what you asked earlier?
I think that's an excellent question. As I mentioned earlier in my previous work, we had units at 80% and 100% of AMI. It's only after moving to the Bay Area that I see that that's the standard here, is to do 80s and 120s.
Okay.
And I think that's just a historic kind of happenstance here, and yet I wouldn't mind seeing 100% units. I would love to see 100% units. Yeah.
And that is perhaps something that will come out of the residential feasibility study that we're currently a part of as well, because 100% hasn't been in our framework.
And I think another part of it that factors in is on the developer side, they're pretty much, especially market rate, but even some nonprofit developers will be, thinking about how much money they can make. And I think that's part of why 120% is popular, is just,
It's attractive to the developer.
Exactly. And it helps them pencil the deal better.
And in theory, market rate housing is better in general. It improves affordability.
And I mean, we've seen, circumstances where 120% of AMI units are actually more expensive than market rate units.
Other buildings.
On rentals.
On rentals.
Got it.
Commissioner Davis, did you want to add something to that discussion about affordability and eligibility?
I did. It was more to the marketing piece, because I actually had a question, but I'm going back a little further than that. In one of the slides, you talked about some requirements for the developer, and one of them did say a marketing plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, to me, that would include how you're going to market the BMR, and couldn't we have some specific requirements, like maybe 6 months before it's completed, you have to put out some kind of an announcement to the community or to the Bay Area at large, or however it's decided. But it seems to me we could add specificity to that and a timeline to that. Could we not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think that's part of why we're, recommending many of these updates is it's, both from a developer side of things, it's better to have more certainty and have things clearly outlined, but there's also a lot of benefits to, the community and to residents.
And to that point, we recently, at 801 Fassler, there were, I think, 2 low, 3 moderate, and I know people who went in to look at those units when they first opened up, not specifically the low income, and the person showing the property didn't even know that they existed. I mean, it was like this big hush about them. Maybe there's an advantage to the developers selling the market rate ones first, obviously, the return on their investment. But that's another thing that I think should be considered is that the marketing plan, you're talking about having to build them all at the same time and know where they're going to be in the building. Well, let's make sure they're all marketed and listed at the same time as well.
100%. City Attorney, did you want to weigh in on this as well?
No, I think the points that I wanted to raise were all brought up, but thank you.
Great, thank you. And we do need to do public comment. So if there's other comments or questions along this line that we want to get in and then do public comment and then come back, what?
I can wait till after public comment.
Okay. I don't have any cards. So if there is a desire, here comes a card. Yes, we don't have anyone to bring the card. So here comes Director Updegrave to collect the card.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne Moore from the Pacific Manor, also a member of Pacific Housing for All. And thank you for the presentation this evening. While you were talking, I was jotting down notes. And so being a former healthcare provider, I acknowledge what most people probably feel in this room, that housing is necessary for health and life, including the health of the individual, the family, and our community as a whole. And our community has not built affordable housing in quite some time, and it's directly related with our homelessness. And since we have we have desperate in need of low-income housing and acutely need it to we should prioritize transitional housing till our permanent housing is built. And I just want to put that out there as an important thought. I also feel that public land should be earmarked for low-income housing. I think our housing fund should have a continuous source of income, and one source would be a certain percentage of sales for properties over $5 million. Inclusionary rates have to tread that fine line between assuring some low-income units while not discouraging others, so the Nexus study sounds like it's going to be important, and the sooner the better. In lieu fees, oh my gosh, we've just been seeing how in lieu fees were paid and did not cover the cost of building a unit, and that those costs are continuously rising, and I just really am concerned and feel that maybe things should be built rather than have our folks have the opportunity to pay for more. I think the city should have a pathway to attract nonprofits to build or preserve low-income housing. Whether nonprofits waive paying property taxes, they build a greater number of desperately needed low-income housing that truly financially and socially provide community resiliency necessary for Pacifica to thrive. And trust should be encouraged so that participants can build up equity. Property maintenance is embedded in their model, and the property can be maintained as affordable in perpetuity. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Thank you, City Clerk.
Good evening, City Council, Planning Commission, and
could you state your name for the record, please?
yes, hi, Mike Wallman, Pacifica District 2. So what I'm hearing here is even with 120% AMI, I would think a dual income tech family would never hit that number at all. And for somebody to try to purchase a home, obviously having more than one income would significantly aid in being able to qualify for a mortgage. So how do we deal with this disparity here of a larger family with one income maybe being able to qualify but not being able to get a mortgage, or a dual income family not being able to hit this 120% number, which is really low for a dual income tech family. $1.3 million for buying a house here is pretty damn much. I'm sorry, that's insane. And my fear would be for people who would consider buying a home, all this creation of new affordable housing is going to lower all of our existing home values. So how does that become equitable? I think there's a lot to consider here. Obviously, there's a requirement by the state for you to impose some of this upon the community. Not saying that that's a wrong thing to do. I just think that you have to weigh how this impacts the existing residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Assistant, oh no, City Clerk, who's doing it? Oh, Kate.
We have one raised hand online. iPhone, you may unmute yourself and state your name for the record.
Thanks, Caitlin.
My name is Mike Vernazza. My name is Mike Vernazza, resident of Pacifica in Lindemar. Hoping that
Could you hold on, please, Mike? Mike, can you hold on for just a second? We need to figure out what's going on with our speaker here in the chamber. We can't hear you. It's pretty buzzy and a little goofy. If you can just bear with us, we'll give you all your time back as soon as we are able to identify what might be the problem. Okay, try again. Let's see how it sounds now.
Does it sound better this time?
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you, PCT. Thank you. Okay, please start all over again. State your name for the record.
Yes, hello. My name's Michael Vernazza. I'm a resident in the Lindemar neighborhood. Thanks everybody for all the hard work you've put in. I'm hoping that a member of the council could ask a consulting firm and all the new laws that are being passed and these waivers that seem to be available now, what is the total height of a building that could get built in our town at this point in time? And is it true that, parking really isn't a requirement to satisfy all of these people that potentially are living in these new units that are going to be built? Curious if there's an opportunity to get some information to those questions.
Thank you. Did someone note those questions, council members? Yes? Good. Okay. Got it? Great. Do we have any other callers?
There are no additional raised hands.
Thank you, Caitlin. Okay. Seeing no other raised hands or comments, we'll close public comment and bring it back. And I would like to pursue the questions that were just asked, except for I didn't write them down.
To ask if the state density bonus law has a maximum height that you could waive to, or if you can go infinity, and if there are parking, if there are ways to waive out of all parking.
Thank you, Chair Hauser. The density bonus does allow waivers for height in order to construct a project at the permitted density. There isn't necessarily a maximum limit. I think there are a lot of different controlling factors, and the sort of that base density really being the primary factor in terms of how much bonus you could build would then affect the overall size of the building. So, in Pacifica, our heights range from 35 feet now to 55 feet with our rezoning. So it would be possible to go above that with a density bonus. Another controlling factor for a lot of development too is the type of development. And staying under high-rise like staying under a high-rise construction type is another limiting factor. So I don't know that we would get, I don't know that we would cross into that.
Can you clarify what you mean by staying under a high-rise development?
Yes, and Chair Hauser, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I can't remember if it's 75 feet or 85 feet. That kicks you into a different construction type.
Yeah, it's typically 5 stories.
5 stories.
Yeah. So I think what Director Updegrave is saying is that at certain amount of building height, you're able to use wood frame construction. You don't need smoke barriers. They're all they're not like a million means of egress that you need to meet. And so it's more economical to build at those lower heights. But if you go to a tower, that's a much more difficult building typology to finance and build before you get your money back out of it. You're using concrete and steel. I mean, Vice Mayor would be able to speak to this as well. And so I think what the director is trying to say is people are disincentivized from building infinity high because it's infinity expensive.
Yes, and our current densities and the amount of bonus that you can get wouldn't necessarily support a tower-type construction, typically. And then in terms of the parking, there is the ability to use incentives and waivers to reduce or eliminate parking. There's also different state laws that apply to parking depending on the target population for the housing. So there may be different standards for supportive housing or transitional housing, homeless shelters, those types of things.
But I would presume there's no standards for lack of public transit.
That's correct.
And I'm under the impression that you can't totally waive out of requiring parking, which you can't do zero parking. The state density bonus law has parking standards that in some instances are actually higher than, as you get to 3 and 4 bedrooms, they're actually more onerous than what we provide in our own municipal code, but for smaller bedroom counts, they're less. And I think we tried to be consistent with the housing element and the rezoning.
Yeah, and so, with any development project, we really have to look at the specifics of the case that's in front of us and what laws apply. So, both of those paint a very broad picture.
Right. Okay. Oh, yes.
Just came to
Commissioner
mind.
Redfield, please.
Said one question, thank you, Mayor. With that parking issue that came up, given the transit corridor items, are there any state laws that allow for more parking in Pacifica specifically, because we are a commuter city? We do not have access to public transportation. Are there any differences in, say, a Millbrae that has high access to, high-density housing that has public transportation? Are there any differences in that in state law? Are we allowed more parking, in other words? Or would there be any changes in that? I don't know if there's any differences in that.
Right. I can't speak to every state law, but there are state laws that have passed in recent years that basically eliminated all parking requirements within a certain proximity to, I think it's called high quality, high frequency transit. And those exceptions don't apply within Pacifica because we don't have, we don't have those facilities. We don't have a BART station. We don't have buses that are running every 11 minutes. But in terms of a state law that says that we can require more, I don't believe that exists. But and again, there's a number of different rules impacting parking. We also have parking requirements within our coastal zone in order to preserve coastal access. So it's a complex question. I hope I was able to provide some information for you.
Yes, please, go ahead, Commissioner Hauser.
I'm going to ask a question to the city attorney that is also an opinion.
Opinionated question.
Opinionated question. So I have kind of been hearing, and I also feel that we want units and not fees. And what a lot of cities do is they say that you can't fee out of affordable housing unless it's a creative solution that is posed to the council. Any creative solution has to go to council. So even if the planning commission were to get an application that we would normally approve without being the recommending body, if you're proposing something creative, it has to go to council. And if that was the case, if we adopted this similar ideology that a lot of other cities have done, would we need the nexus study to set the fee, or could we, and by we I mean the council, could the council or the city do non-nexus study-based fees that were more responsive to whatever the current environment was for construction costs and housing prices?
So is your question whether if someone wants to fee out rather than adopting like a standard in lieu fee, they would come with a proposal,
so
effectively?
My personal opinion is that fractional fees for units, which we don't currently have, are great. So if someone owes 12.3 units, they don't get out of 0.3, they pay the fee for the 0.3. But they can't pay 12.3 units worth of fees, which is what a nexus study would back up. It would say you pay 500K times 12.3 or whatever. Instead, if the council wanted to see inclusionary housing or in lieu housing money, could the council entertain an application where the value of that fee was not contingent on the nexus study?
As it's an in lieu fee, you technically don't need the type of nexus study you need for other fees, for other Mitigation Fee Act or impact fees. I think you do want some sort of standard so that you're treating developers the same across the board. So, is there a way that maybe we could have one without an exact number, but some sort of standard? I'm not sure. That could be more difficult to do, but certainly the city could say that an in lieu fee is not allowed absent certain circumstances.
Unless the council approves it.
Exactly, except for fractional in lieu fees, which I believe was the recommendation.
Yes. Related to that, what does the city's current bucket of affordable housing money that was contributed by in lieu fees, what does that pay for? Because I believe it's not just the city building affordable housing units. There's other factors that fee contributes to, correct?
That's correct. There are limits on what an in lieu fee can be used for, and I can pull that up. I don't have it memorized. Maybe Tim might.
I have the language in front of me now from the inclusionary ordinance that it says it shall be used for the purpose of providing funding assistance for the provision of affordable housing and reasonable administrative costs, including but not limited to a buyer's assistance program for eligible households. That's in the current ordinance. So basically it can be used for the providing housing and administrative costs. The administrative costs would have to be a reasonable fee. At least some ordinances have a cap on that.
Administrative costs, the city's administrative costs, or?
For administering BMR, like for administering the below market rate.
For administering city-managed BMR?
I think to think of it this way is the kind of cost of running the program. So it could be actually the Grand Nexus study is a fee that you have to pay to kind of keep the program running every few years. It could be from monitoring the units that you do have. It's not that you have direct management of them, but you still need staff people that are making sure that the developer is doing the income certifications correctly and that documentation is being turned in annually. So that's an administrative fee. I've also seen where there is a cost of the city to actually work to spend the money with an affordable housing developer. They're like looking at their pro forma, things like that. So they've got a staff person who's kind of looking at how to do that. The legal costs of creating legal agreements, those are all fees that are kind of part of the administration.
And all of that centers around a city-led affordable housing development? I guess let me give context of why I'm asking the question. If I don't necessarily know that this group would be inclined to go as extreme to say no developer can pay an in lieu fee, you have to build the units unless you have a unique case. I want to make sure that if we're depleting that bucket of money that the city currently has for affordable housing, what does that bucket of money serve? Because if there's other services that aren't directly related to the city actually developing affordable housing, I think we want to be cognizant of what funding might get impacted. So that's why I'm trying to understand what those funds fund.
Yeah, and so it would be, potentially things like Tim talked about the kind of the hard cost, right? Like the mortgage, the construction, and then the soft cost where, a local agency might provide like some additional funding toward the construction, acquisition of land, those kinds of things, but not necessarily that the city has $22 million and is going out and building an affordable housing project. So it would just be part of financing for an affordable housing developer.
Okay.
Well, I think one of your figures in your chart showed the $22 million project, and there was $1 million blue bar at the top.
Yeah,
and I was thinking, that would be our part. for
Exactly.
example. Okay.
That's what the in lieu, that's the primary use of the in lieu fees, is to help fund 100% affordable housing projects that you may be only putting in $1 million, but it's a $22 million project.
Got it.
So you're helping to leverage these tax credit funds and other funds to make it work. So it's very common that you've got the federal tax credits, state tax credits, county, soft debt, and local soft debt all in the same project.
I see.
There's a lot of funding streams, in the stack.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing, the subtext of what I'm hearing is, let's make sure we don't spend it all on legal fees, studies, et cetera, and when the opportunity comes along to give our $1 million to this project, we don't have $1 million anymore.
Right.
So would there be a way of, in terms of annual reporting, in terms of the policy manuals you're describing, like how do we, for the council's sake, for all of our sake, put a check on that?
Yeah, so that money, that's a great question. That money would have to be earmarked or in a sub-account to be used for those specific purposes. So it wouldn't be used, for example, for housing element implementation. Right? That's not the purpose of the in lieu fee. The in lieu fee needs to be very directly tied to the creation, preservation, rehabilitation of affordable housing.
But not necessarily city-led.
Correct. Yeah, we're not a big enough city, I think, to develop our own 100% affordable project.
I think it'd be helpful to provide an example from East Palo Alto, which is supporting a number of housing initiatives. And so they are using in lieu fees to support 100% affordable projects like we've discussed here, but they also have programs to assist with legal assistance, foreclosure prevention, rental assistance, and they're using a fee on rental receipts from private landlords to help fund those projects. They're using a portion of their transient occupancy taxes to pay for those programs. They're not using any of their operating money, but some cities may dedicate a bit of their operating funds to that because if it's an important enough program for them, they make those commitments.
Okay, thanks. That example is helpful.
Yep.
At least from my standpoint, I agree with what Chair Hauser said, that we definitely want to see more units built here, but then at the same time, we also need to be considerate of needing that bucket of money to also support units being built here.
Well, just to interject real quick, one thing we have seen is that folks have like, okay, that's set percentage for, oh, we need 15% if you're building the units, but a higher requirement for like an alternate compliance option, such as like 25% if you're, or 20% if you're doing an in lieu payout. So it's like, oh, okay, if you're gonna do the in lieu payout and you really want to do the in lieu payout, then you're gonna have to pay more. And that does also allow for the opportunity for there to be like it's called an alternative compliance hearing, where you can, to some degree negotiate with the developer also of, oh, let's say maybe you build 10% on site, then you do a 10% in lieu fee. So that way you're kind of getting both.
A little of both.
Vice Mayor.
I just want to thank Commissioner Berman for bringing that up, and I think that's really a critical piece of defining both our in lieu fees, but also our Housing Action Fund. And just to give an example, because I dug into this with the in lieu fees that were collected for the Harmony One project. Originally there were 2 units and then 1 vacant piece of land to build affordable housing, and then somehow all that went away for an in lieu fee of less than $400,000. And in all this time, that money's been sitting, and then the cost of units have just gone up, and it's nothing anymore. And also, the city ended up spending some of it for like updating our previous housing element, right, for administration costs. And now this money is like so precious to try to build these units, and we need to have really good controls over how both of those funds can be used if we're setting them up. And I agree with Chair Hauser in that I don't want to see in lieu fees. I want to see the units being built, because it's so hard to get any units built, and everyone helps someone, find a roof over their head. And, this is a nice, maybe, I don't know if there are certain criteria by which they can come to us. Sure, there needs to be an exception if there's, something, unique or, a particular hardship. But I think if we can go to a place where we're mostly actually building those units, that would be my preference. And at some point, we're going to go through and prioritize. You had mentioned prioritizing other things, and I hadn't prepared that. I was quickly going through the housing element, but like funding our Housing Action Fund, and we had put some money into it, but now those sources of money are gone. So how are we, and we've been spending a good chunk of that, so how are we going to start putting that money back in so we can put in that blue money and get some really affordable housing?
Yeah, that is, that's a great point, Vice Mayor Bowles. We are hoping to come back in January or February with some, with our housing element implementation plan, providing council, the opportunity to provide direction on, what programs and actions we ought to be prioritizing. Working on funding sources for the Housing Action Fund is something that, we've been in conversation with HART about as part of our work with them and trying to find funding sources. So not just an in lieu fee, but, so that we can have a more robust fund, so that we can have a steady stream coming in, and that we can use those funds, toward affordable housing programs. And right now, a lot of our work has been trying to lay the framework, establish the policies, get the work done, get things on the books, get our manuals. But that is definitely something that we've been in conversation with, and we will be coming back to council in January or February looking for some direction on prioritization.
Thank you. And I do think for a city like ours, using some of the in lieu money for that purpose, which was the housing element, I think that's an appropriate use of funds, and I think we needed it because we don't have a lot of money anywhere else. And we are extremely lucky to have HART staff working with us, and it's a really important contract that we need to keep. And so all of the work that's been presented to us tonight, I mean, could you imagine if we had staff do that, how long it would take and how much more stress it would put on them? And so thank you, thank you. You are the experts, and we rely on you, and it's an honor to work with you as a board member, and I really appreciate all of your suggestions, and I'm very, very interested in looking towards the protection, production, and preservation policies moving forward.
So with regard to direction, what I want to understand from staff is what you need from us tonight, if anything specifically. That's number one. And my number two is if we could just go one more time over rough timeline. We've talked about a lot of different things tonight. We talked about the Nexus study. We talked about work that's going on in between now and then. We've talked about January and February policies coming back to council. So if we could just get a kind of a next steps kind of idea.
Thank you, Mayor Beckmeyer. Let's start with the timeline. We do have HART as our experts, our staff experts, and they're able to start drafting ordinances to update and modernize our inclusionary and our density bonus. The approach that we're hoping to take is to do this initial modernizing cleanup so that we have good ordinances in place and clear resolution in terms of whatever the fee may be in place, so that as we're getting applications coming in, we were able to implement. And so that's something that, I think we would hope to do. I can't believe it's already October, but, I would say like within the next, 6 months, first quarter of the year, that's something we can move fairly quickly on because we have HART. And then in terms of the more, substantive changes, that would be, I think the Grand Nexus and feasibility studies, will probably be completed at the end of 2026. And so there will probably be another update, with some of the results and some recommendations coming out of that. And I would imagine that would be work that would happen in 2027, 2028, so a little further out. In terms of direction, we heard a lot tonight, a lot of different things, and so it's very helpful to understand, what it is, council and planning commission are really looking for. So things like, like fractional fees, do we want, do you want us to bring back a proposal that just looks at fractional fees and no other in lieu fees, or, right, like kind of, that would be helpful to know in terms of what we should put together. I think that was a big one that I heard about. And go ahead, sorry.
As well as, I think the split for rental and
Yes.
ownership and the affordability levels.
Yes, please, Chair Hauser.
Thank you. as someone that's built a lot of both market rate and deed restricted projects, also with Hart, who I feel like is wonderful, like Armand, like everybody is wonderful. I want to talk a little bit about one of the questions that Councilmember Wright asked on like what incentivizes a developer to build housing. And then I want to also kind of pose a question that I don't know, I'm torn on this, but on rental housing, to me it's a really easy, like, yeah, that should be deed restricted in perpetuity. On for sale housing, I often wonder, like, you want the units to stay, but you also want people who are in lower income situations to be able to participate in the housing market and build equity, because that is fair. And I think building generational wealth is really important, and having the opportunity to do so is really important. So if you buy a deed restricted home and you hold it for, in our current ordinance, 45 years, in Santa Rosa, 30 years, in other cities, 55 years, right? If you go through the hard part of holding that home for your family, you may not be seeing that participation, but you're building generational wealth for your family. And so I'm really torn, because I love the idea of always having deed restricted units in Pacifica, but deed restricting for sale homes when people are, it's like, why put down a down payment if you're not going to get the benefit of what everybody who buys a market rate home gets? So that's the first, and I don't know what the answer is, but that's something that I struggle with. Going back to what you said, Councilmember Wright, on the incentives, and we've talked a lot about the 120% moderate. I think that developers really do have a hard time building very low income and lower income homes. It's really hard to build a home for like, $600,000 to $800,000 more, depending on what the fees are, and only get $200,000 back for it. That's a tax on the development, and that's part of development. I think that some cities do a really good job defining the things we can define. So for example, what % down payment is part of our inclusionary ordinance? Is it 3%? Is it 5%? Is it 7%? Is it the max that the state allows at 10%? I think that it's really important to define what % income is qualifying. I think that should be 30% for lower income households and 35% for moderate, consistent with the state. I do want to say that while I think that 120% does attract a lot of for sale development that Pacifica is not currently getting, if we choose to go to a lower AMI, then we can do what Cotati just did and think about waiving impact fees on just deed restricted affordable units, because maybe there's some assistance there, right? So I think that for the split on rental, I think lower incomes are better personally. For sale housing, I think the proposal that Hart has put together is the right proposal, and I would love to see an ordinance that clearly delineates the things that we can define. And if we're going to take out HOA fees, private mortgage insurance, property tax, all the things that go into the calculation, it may not be perfect, but at least a developer can predict out close 3 years and ahead, right?
Yeah. I'd like to respond to the first part of that comment and question about the 45 years in perpetuity. I actually have looked at this question a lot in terms of how you build intergenerational wealth, and particularly in a city that was much more demographically diverse than here, and had a tradition of a lot of black families being locked out of homeownership. And what we found was we actually looked at we had enough history on BMR units to say, what did the resale price get them compared to what they would have gotten in the market? And we had a resale restriction that was basically 3% per year plus a capital gain, like you did some capital's work. And we found that wasn't quite sufficient. But if we had an earlier policy where it was 5%, and the concern was when they pulled it from 5% to 3%, they were concerned about the continuing affordability to the next family. But we found that at that 5%, people were making the same percent increase that people in the regular market were making over the long term. I mean, if you're in an income-restricted unit, you are actually more protected from those downs in the market that you have in the regular market rate units. But in the long term, we were about the same increase.
Is that on a national level, a state level, or a Bay Area level?
This was, I have to admit something here. I moved here from Boston, Massachusetts. And so this was research we did in Boston, where we'd had a 20-year-old BMR program with thousands of units that were created. So we had the track record there. It's also a high-cost area with high increases like here, so there's some comparability. But to say, the lesson learned from that is that you can adjust some of how you set your resale mechanisms within your agreements to make sure people can still get something. And one thing we were proposing was having a fund whereby you're guaranteed of getting that resale price. And if we have to give a bigger down payment to the next buyer, down payment assistance, to get them into that unit, then so be it. That's kind of one of the things we were looking at.
I think that's, sorry, microphone's loud. I think that's really cool, and that's very helpful for me to understand, because this is like one of those things that's been plaguing me for a long time, so that's really helpful.
And you're looking at really, and the balance of what you're looking at is you're looking at the balance between the long-term affordability, is it affordable to the next homeowner, and yes, you want to give them some equity. But if you if they are there for the 45 years, they're hitting the jackpot at that point if you've just lifted the restriction. So we had units that were selling for $400,000 that we said they were really $2 million views on the Seaport. So it's like, okay, do you want to, but we also had units in outer neighborhoods where like, maybe we should just let them have the whole equity win, but in like a downtown high-end condo complex, it's kind of like you're kind of giving it away.
Interesting.
Yep.
I have a question for that. Can you pass the property to the next generation? Can you transfer the property?
Yes, there are, within the legal agreements, there are ways you can pass it along to the next generation. Generally speaking, though, that you want it to be that next generation is also income eligible so that they're benefiting.
Okay.
If they're not income eligible, we're saying you should sell it to someone who is.
They have to qualify too.
Yeah, they have to qualify too. Yeah.
When someone qualifies initially, let's just say it's a young person out of college, they've got a starting job, and then they're moving up and now they're making more money, but they're still forever granted that unit because they qualified at that point, or is there ever any review? Especially for rentals, I mean, it would be a lot more difficult for.
For rental units, there's a review every year.
Oh, there
For
is.
home ownership units, once you're in the unit, it's yours. And so if your income goes up, to kind of the question of some of the costs that you might incur as a homeowner, if your income goes up, you're still paying that lower mortgage rate, and over time, you could actually probably maybe, get some equity out of it.
Okay. And then to the question about the terms, 35, 45, 55 years, I guess I haven't heard of too many that are like in perpetuity. Obviously, that's something we would love, but do you see that as a disincentive for developers? Like some might be looking to develop the project and then, and then sell it off or so.
No,
Not really, because looking at Chair Hauser,
in 55 years, if it's a for sale project, in 10 years, the developer's gone, right? So.
yeah, that's exactly the answer that I would give. That the timeline for the developer is not that far out.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, then that's great if we can get.
And just to be clear, that the state density bonus law does require a minimum of 45 years on homeownership and 55 on rentals. That's your baseline that we would start with.
Thank you.
Greg.
Picking up on that wonderful information we got, did you contemplate, like, if you own that unit for like less than 5 years, it'd be at a lower rate? You get that 5% bonus over the whole time if you own it for longer. Like, pick an arbitrary number like 5 years.
We did not contemplate it in that case, no.
It would seem to me that that would be a good incentive to help people build generational wealth, because they get a 2% kicker, which is like an extra 10% over a 5-year period.
Actually, I have to say, we have seen where if you resold within a very short period of time, you did get a lower rate. We have seen that. We have seen that.
And a question for Ms. Updegrave. How many units did we build this year?
In 2024, we constructed a total of 20 units, 16 of which were accessory dwelling units, and we don't have the numbers for 2025 yet.
Okay, and how many did we approve? Any idea?
In title?
Yeah.
In 2024, we entitled 2 units.
2?
2. I think 2, you know.
Two
with-
of 2 applications, right?
Yes. I mean, I think too, the rezoning, we are anticipating, additional applications coming in.
Okay. And then back to the low-income thing. What counts as income?
We look when we're, or do you want to answer that? He's just getting training on that. Excuse me. We're looking at, your employment income, public assistance income, income from assets, such as interest. So we're really kind of like, largely we're looking at what is the adjusted gross income on your income taxes. Now that's looking at your past income. We're trying to see what your current income is. So we're kind of looking at the same documents that you be submitting, that you be having to put forward for your income taxes.
And is there a net worth piece in there at all?
That is really a policy decision. This is something we can discuss as part of this process. So there are kind of 2 different philosophies on this. One is that you do what's called an imputed income, which may be like City of San Francisco does this, where it's like 10%. They say you have these assets. We're going to say 10% of that contributes to your annual income. But then they don't have an asset cap on the program. So basically, if you have a lot of assets, you end up having this imputed income that makes you go over income. Whereas there's other places that say, we're only going to take what the actual interest you're getting on those assets, and then we may have an asset cap, either for rental program or a homeownership program. It may be different. It may be different if you're a senior. They may not count pension and 401ks towards that number, but that's part of this system.
So along those lines, if we didn't have one, perhaps we might attract more seniors to purchase it, which would cause more turnover in the units. Which would that necessarily be a beneficial thing, or would it be a negative thing? I don't know the answer to that question.
That's the fastest growing homeless population, so I think that's a beneficial thing, right? You're helping more people over time.
So I guess the question we would need to think about and perhaps give direction on is, how do we handle net worth? Because my active income a few years from now.
And there's more than one way to do it.
Yeah.
There's more than one way to do it.
And so is it, for our purposes in discussing and thinking about those policy decisions, would it be in relationship to our demographics here in Pacifica?
You could look at that.
I mean, it seems like it's not changing dramatically. We're not suddenly getting this giant influx of younger people. We are steadily growing our aging population. So perhaps that informs some, maybe not, but it seems like we'd want it to be pertinent to what Pacifica's demographics look like.
Yeah, and I would, generally those guidelines are within your guidelines, not in your housing ordinance, so that you have the flexibility to change them.
Right.
But it certainly could be part of the discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay. Other questions from staff for us? I just want to make sure we're leaving you with what you need from us. And certainly both ways. if
And
there's
and you were
any-
asking for specific questions. Do you want like show of hands or something to support particular things? Because we've had a few people speak, but certainly not everybody up here.
Yeah, thank you. I think it would be helpful if there were consensus on how to handle the in lieu fees.
Versus the build, you mean?
Right, like, so is the direction to come back with a fractional fee only? Is it that, I think I'd like to just understand that so that we can bring that back.
And it's kind of a friendly amendment to that. We're recommending strongly that you at least update the fees by basically the changes in home values and CPI. And
Oh, you mean from 2007 to 2025?
yes, we want to.
Yeah.
Okay. Clear guidance on that.
Anybody have a problem with that?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Capture that money for the.
And I think we're getting clear guidance that you want the fractional unit fee, which I think I'm fully on board for that one. Think every city should be doing that.
Are we in agreement on that? Majority of people, yes?
And I think a question that might get some different responses is in terms of changing the affordability levels, I'm hearing that you may be okay with we proposed a 50, 80, 110. There's also, which is it'll be the same outcome to the developer, but what if we did a 60, 80, 100 in terms of the rental units? That's the same outcome to the developer as a 50, 80, 110. And I'm just kind of, if there's kind of any thoughts on that.
Mayor?
Microphone?
Mike?
Mike.
Go ahead.
I mean, I don't want to bring up the bottom any more than we already have to. So I think it should stay at 50.
Okay.
What you do above that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not a rental developer.
Okay.
But I think you have to hit certain percentages of like different bedroom counts, right? Like, especially if you're trying to get the family tax credits. And there may be different AMIs, right? As you're trying to get LIHTC financing from the state and for affordable housing, there are different requirements. And I don't want to do something in Pacifica that disallows an affordable developer from getting credits. So I almost want to say that the blended average should be determined, and then the developer can determine how they want to hit it. Or maybe part of the study is what does an affordable developer need to hit to get tax credits?
I think it'd be helpful to clarify the difference here. I'm speaking only about the on-site inclusionary units.
Oh, on-site inclusionary.
On-site inclusionary units. When we are spending money from the fund, of course you want to just make it available to what will work for a project that can get CTAC funds. You know what I mean? So we have a lot more flexibility there.
Just inclusionary rental, I defer to Mary.
We're just talking about the inclusionary. But what I was basically giving you what is the blended average. I was giving you a blended average of 80% of AMI. Did you have a preference for 60, 80, and 100, or 50, 80, and 110? It was all the blended average was 80 for both of those. Yeah. So we can discuss this further later, I'm sure. And on the home ownership, we were considering leaving yours unchanged, but is there an interest in going to like 80, 100, and 120, or 80 and just 120? I mean, that's another, whether you're opening up the option for 100% units.
I would be in favor of 80, 100, 120.
I think you're going to have a hard time getting people to build here. It is not cheap to build in San Mateo County.
Okay, so how do we get people to build?
Yeah.
I think you do what Hart recommended. I think the split that you guys recommended is consistent with South City and Daly City. And like, this is what the low moderate blend is what almost every San Mateo County city has in their ordinance.
Okay. I'm convinced.
But low is 80, so it's not really low.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the 120 and 80 is what whoever the administrator is using to qualify buyers, but the affordable sales price is being set at a lower percent of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
usually 10 percentage points lower.
So that allows.
To give a marketing window, to create a marketing
Right.
window.
So that allows more families to qualify.
Correct.
I just want the stuff built.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm with
Well,
you.
120 is not really 120. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm with you, Greg.
Thoughts, comments?
Just to kind of round out the in lieu fee from my perspective, and I think we'll have a better idea after the Grand Nexus study, but I'd be interested in seeing what an in lieu fee cost would be to a developer, for the developer to say, ooh, it doesn't make sense for me to pay this in lieu fee. I want to build the units instead, or work with a partner to build the units. But I still like the ability for the city to gain that in lieu fee if there so happens to be a developer willing to pay that very high cost.
Thank you, Vice Chair Berman. I think what I'm hearing is that the changing the structure to possibly not allow in lieu fees at all, or only in these special circumstances, or as part of the fractional, whatever it may be part of what we bring back once we have the data from the study. But more immediately, it would be updating the value, the price, and then adding provisions to allow for fractional fee payment. But that perhaps this, I don't want to call, it's not quite a prohibition, but maybe this more restrictive use is something that we would explore at a future date.
Maybe I'm seeing them as mutually exclusive, to where there was a recommendation for, if there is a fractional unit, then we update the fee per Hart's recommendation. I'm on board with that. But I'm not convinced that I'd want to update an ordinance that says there is no in lieu fee for full units. You only have an in lieu fee for a fractional unit.
And that's not what we're recommending.
Right.
In fact,
Right. But I think it was discussed.
yeah, there
So-
is been a lot of discussion about cities that are too restrictive in the options are in danger of being sued because they did not provide options. So it is important that you have some options that are reasonable. You can still set something that sets a preference. You know, it's like, yeah, we're going to make it a little bit harder to get to
Yes.
pay the inclusionary, but a steering, but not an absolute prohibition. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe they could bring it to council with some unique
Well, that's what
suggestion.
Samantha was saying a
Yeah.
minute ago.
I like
or
that.
Half an hour ago.
But then I guess what I was saying is,
I support Chair
An
O.
hour ago.
I think it's especially, and I'm not sure what the next step is, if we're going to have another joint study session, or if we're going to break out and it'll come to planning commission and then go to council, but whoever's reviewing the options for consideration next, I think it would be helpful to see the updated in lieu fee numbers, assuming that we don't have a prohibition on, paying an in lieu fee. Like, let's say, okay, we'll allow developers to pay an in lieu fee. What's that fee, and how much does it cost to build a unit?
Right.
And how do we make that fee so high that it really incentivizes developers to actually build the unit?
Right.
But there is social benefits to having the units built as part of the whole housing project that I'm very interested in.
And that is what I'm most interested in, but I think still having the opportunity for a developer to pay a really high in lieu fee is potentially beneficial to that developer, but also beneficial to the city.
Can we add, instead of having an in lieu fee, right, if like maybe that stays with the council thing, could we add a different fee that's more of a one-time tax that every project has, like, it would be dependent on size, but there would be an affordable fee that was not in lieu?
So then we're
just
still
separate, so we're
funding
still
that
funding. We should,
program.
I totally agree. And if, like, let's say that those funds, almost, I mean, maybe, that, the park fee is still an in lieu fee.
But then how many developments do we need? I mean, we don't get a lot of
Yeah, but
developments.
think about how many second loans, right? Homebuyer assistance, like the people, like, let's say you do want to finance like the 60% person being able to qualify for the 120%, right? Like, there are other things you can do with the money that get deeper affordability.
Yeah, I'm just saying, how do we make sure that we get the money? Like, if it's just a tax per development and we only have one development every year.
I just want, I hear what you're saying, and I would love to see the numbers too. What I saw on the screen is like not anywhere near what it takes to build a unit, right? And so if you're given that money today, and then you have to save up to have enough for 10 of those, by then the money is worth less, right? And so it's a losing game to be taking in lieu fees, and I'm assuming there's some limit to how much we can charge.
There is. I think it could be potentially problematic to have a fee in addition to a requirement to build unless somehow it's like proportionate. So that there's, I think that there was a discussion about in lieu fees in coordination with building units to meet the obligation, that there's some kind of mix that could be looked at. But in terms of just having a separate fee, which would be like an impact fee that would have to go through a nexus study that's going to be difficult, and then have the on-site building obligation as well, that I think
What about
that
like
would be difficult to.
What about a fair share fee for like administering our like BMR program? Like there's some
So you can like in agreements, you can have like a monitoring fee.
Yeah.
So you can make the developer pay the cost of implementing the program. So like it can be the upfront fee to run the BMR sales, and then a yearly monitoring program for rental units, for example. That's fairly common. I don't know that you'd want a monitoring fee. I'd look to Hart for more information on this, but a monitoring fee for the ownership units, because
You want
there
them to
is a
keep their
fee.
money. You want them to keep their money.
Yeah, I mean, there will be costs at resale or refinance, and maybe there's some way to capture some of those, a fee at that point. But certainly at the initial phase and requiring a fee of the developer to pay for the costs of implementing everything is fine.
Far too many cities have not put monitoring fees into their legal agreements. And yes, there could be a larger fee for initial rent up of a unit and for turnover a unit, and then a smaller annual fee for the rental monitoring charged to the landlord. And we're looking right now at we're going more into the BMR monitoring space as an agency and looking to see what we think those numbers would be reasonable. There's not a lot of great data out there on that, but we're looking at that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can we see other cities' ordinance? Just because we don't have the ordinance, so we can see other city, because they're getting builder to build, and they're very close to us. Like Daly City, South San Francisco, San Bruno, they're getting projects done. So what can we do to get them to be incentive to come here to Pacifica to build?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Councilmember Espinoza. I really think that our rezoning program our housing element, our rezoning program has really laid the foundation and help, and we now have the regulatory framework that provides more certainty, more clarity in the rules. And so I do think we are going to see an uptick Unfortunately, we have no control over market conditions. The cost of construction, the cost of land, interest rates, all of these things are very high right now, and that's impacting construction. But I think we are in a really good place in terms of our regulatory framework. And then, steps like this as we work to modernize, our ordinance and make our regulations more clear, more predictable, streamline our processes. These are all things that are going to be very helpful. And having it up, things like updated inclusionary, updated density bonus, are all contribute to that.
All right. Yes. Commissioner
I kind of
Davis,
feel
are
like
you?
maybe, I'm just trying to clarify if I
Okay,
understand.
yes,
So I see this up here, and I
Yes.
see a density bonus ordinance that, if I recall, they said it's unenforceable because the state, so that seems like it should be updated. I see in lieu fee resolution, if I understand, that hasn't, those fees are from 2007. But there's some interest here in the group of eliminating an in lieu fee as a possibility and going to fractional ones. But what if in the meantime, while we're waiting for the Grand Nexus study, we updated the in lieu fees so that at least they're current until we decide to change them, so we aren't giving it away. And then the inclusionary housing ordinance, I'm not sure I understand exactly what needs to be done to that one, but yeah. Wouldn't those kind of be logical steps forward, maybe?
Yeah, and some of the changes we're thinking about for the inclusionary housing ordinance are very technical changes to kind of bring them in line with best practices. But I think this conversation that's the most salient about any changes was this conversation about changing the affordability levels. Yeah, that's the main piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well then, anything further? I don't think there is anything further. Then I will adjourn the meeting.
No comments? No comments?
Can I
Do
make
you have more
one?
comments?
No, I said anybody
Oh.
out there.
Can I make one final comment? I'd like to really thank you tonight. I think this has been a great discussion. It's been a really, we've seen cities where everyone's fighting with each other, and I think that this was a really good example of people asking thoughtful questions, providing good thoughts about what they really see they want their city to do. So thank you.
We appreciate you very much and your support and partnership. Thank you.
I would say public comments. I don't know.
We did public comment.
Oh, we did.
See?
Yeah, okay, but I thought we were at the end, I don't know.
No,
Okay.
we're not. With there being nothing further, we will adjourn the meeting at 9:10 PM.
Early.